2, 3, 4. In this podcast, you will hear Knights of Vader. Knights of Vader includes, but is not limited to, talk of Star Wars, not ray guns. We can't truly prepare you for the joke that follows this song, but hey, we gave it a try. So here's the Knights of Vader. Crystal Fox report, they are divided. Prequel, sequel, hate and love, they fighted. I know that we are just musicians hired, and their time is up, so here's the Knights of Vader.
A big thank you to An Insperiority Complex for providing our theme song. It is February 12th, 2020. My name is Zach Weber, and I am joined by the Squire of Vader, Rob.
Hey, I'm back, and once again proving to everybody that I can read. Very happy about that.
Yes, remember, we have the exclusive. Nobody else can read. Rob had to read this to me like a bedtime story. That's why it took so long to eventually get to this. Every night he had to give me a phone call as I'm about to go to bed and say, okay, Zach, we're on page 85 of Colin Trevorrow's December 2016 script of the Duel of Fates. And the entire time.
I know last week you and Zenger discussed some things, and I know I have it on good authority that you guys opened that webpage and did a text-to-speech program and had it read to you by Microsoft Sam. You never actually did any of the reading, right?
No, we did not. Good old Microsoft Sam, indeed.
And that added to the excitement because it was all misspelled already. Microsoft Sam was having a real fun time with some of those words.
It was just tripping over those words, folks. It didn't know which way it was up. It was just kept get over one word and just automatically hit the ground again.
Kylo Ren was do Rumini Core.
After a while, I can't even pronounce the word. Just like it's just sounding out the letters.
Yeah,
phonetically. No, but this time I know Rob and I did an episode, the first, because at this point it's going to be part 3 of the Colin Trevorrow script series on Cinemoddities. It feels like a Cinemoddities discussion. But no, the script, I know if you're part of the Knights of Vader Facebook group, I shared it there. If you know where to look on Reddit, you can easily access this. I will link to it in the show notes for those of you who haven't read it but are so inclined. But I know I've been saying it for a while now that I would give my left arm for this script. And I am thrilled at the fact that I'm able to read it with both hands.
Yes.
So I guess we'll do some generic or just a kind of like summary thoughts before we delve into this in any sort of meaningful way. To reiterate, I still love the Rise of Skywalker. I'm happy with what we got, but I do feel that even though this script, the Duel of Fates script dated December 2016, has its problems, I feel like it has a better grandiose conclusion to the Star Wars story than what we got. It feels more, it has a better conclusion element to it than the film that we got in December.
I think I would have to agree. As I was reading through this, it kind of seemed it's more of a, I don't know, I don't even think I can really say fulfilling because, I don't feel that strongly about the sequel trilogy as a whole. But this definitely seemed to tie up a lot of ends that, I think of when I think of episodes 7 and 8.
Yeah, well, there's some things in this, like I really like the Luke Skywalker Kylo Ren dynamic in this. Mm-hmm. I thought that was neat, the way that Luke is kind of behaving the way we always imagined Force Ghosts behaved with people they didn't like, just constantly like nagging them, being like, don't go down there, don't go down that tomb, that sort of stuff is neat. Some stuff like you were saying, the ending, I do think the idea of having this massive battle at Coruscant and everything's kind of like, and you have, it's not the Battle of Endor, mm-hmm. but it's just enough similar to it, but it feels like its own thing. It's like a riff. It feels more like a riff on the Battle of Endor. And the thing that I've forgotten about it in the last couple of months, but something I really was kind of hammering on back during the spring and summer of last year was the Force Awakens subplot of Leia having the Warhammer, the giant space weapon. And we essentially get that in this with Leia piloting, or what's the word, captaining or being in charge of a giant space weapon.
Yeah. I thought a lot of that stuff was pretty neat. Things that I think we said this, last time I was on, we discussed the summary of this script. There was a lot of stuff that kind of, when I think about it, I think about how I've never really seen it in Star Wars, and that plays is pretty neat. That's what I want from Star Wars. I don't want the same tales over and over. I want new, innovative stuff.
Yeah, but there are some things in this that, and it's weird. I don't even think they don't work. They only don't work in a Star Wars sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a just general, we're making a movie, I have no problem with it.
Sure.
The character of Tor Valum,
Mm-hmm.
I find it insanely comical that we have this character that's supposed to be the big bad guy of all bad guys, and Kylo Ren goes to him and it's like, "Oh, so you taught Darth Plagueis?" And he goes, "What?"
Yeah, he's like that name means nothing to me, and he says something like this, like Sith are stupid. These are just labels.
Yeah, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to teach you everything that you know to be a bad guy. And the moment he teaches him everything, he's like, "Yes, Kylo Ren, I have bestowed all my knowledge to you." And Kylo Ren immediately just like goes full scanners on him and just sucks him dry. Yeah. And I'm like, this is great. I'm like, this is like, it's horrible in a Star Wars sense, but it's just like, this character is not important. It's very similar to why I like The Last Jedi and what happened with Snoke. It's like, oh, this character is not important and we're going to discard this. Like, not every Star Wars bad guy needs to be the Emperor. Mm-hmm. Like, a bad guy can just be a bad guy. And Kylo Ren, it's funny. Like, this is where it really pains me to say this, but I've got to give the Madman some credit. The idea of the character, one of our, I don't want to say this, but like one of our main characters, Kylo Ren, literally using a character, sucking them dry, and then discarding them. I love that as a physical manifestation of like, okay, we use this character for what they're worth, moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, that it kind of shocked me, at reading in the script that it's he goes up, he gets to meet Tor Valum. Tor Valum teaches us some stuff, kind of off camera, I guess. And then Kylo Ren's like, "I want to get stronger. I want to suck more life force out of things." And Tor Valum is like, "Nope, you got everything on this planet." And Kylo Ren goes, "I haven't gotten you yet, man." And I was like, "Oh, that came out of nowhere."
Yeah, there's a part of that it's just it's comical. Like, I can imagine seeing that in my head and just giggling. I guess sitting in the theater being like, "Oh, this is horrible." Like, it's great horrible.
Yeah.
That's a Colin Trevorrow moment. That's just like, okay, like efficient storytelling for no other reason than just moving on. Another complaint I really had with this is there's a lot of fan service dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
There's some lines of dialogue, and I really wish I would have written them down, but like there's a lot of just like blatant Star Wars quotes in this. They're so on the nose.
Yep.
Where it's like, oh God, somebody's doing something, and they're like, "Never tell me the odds." And I'm like, no. I'm like, you don't have to be, and I get it. Like, a lot of stuff changes from script to script while you're shooting and editing. Who knows? Mm. But considering that we can only judge this on what we have at our fingertips, we have to judge it at face value. And there's a couple instances like that. Like, there's even, I think there's one or two lines lifted directly from the prequels where it's like, why are you referencing this line of dialogue verbatim? Mm-hmm. Other than just like there's at least 100 different ways to rephrase this that convey what you're trying to get at and provide a little bit of like a twist, a riff on the fan service angle of it all.
Sure.
That's kind of that was my two biggest things. Tor Valum is a giant red flag for a Star Wars fan. I would love to know what the fans would do after we killed off Snoke and then we introduced the giant big bad of all the bad guys and we immediately kill him off. Like, he's introduced at the end of the first act and he's dead by the end of the second act. Yeah. So that's what, maybe tops 40, not even. Tops maybe 10 minutes of screen time?
Yeah, that's probably an overestimate of what it would have been, definitely.
Yeah, that sort of stuff is like, it just like, as a cynical Star Wars fan, I'm like, I like that. I like the idea of prodding the fan base.
Yeah, that was a neat thing. The thing that I definitely picked up on what you were saying about the lines of dialogue being, clunky in some cases, and even though I think it's close, if I remember correctly, to what you were saying. It's like, I think somebody like C-3PO is like, "Oh, we were not going to survive this, blah, blah, blah." And I think Poe's like, "Shut up, don't tell me the odds." And then it's like on the other scene, C-3PO says something like that again. And Rose is like, tell me the odds. I like numbers. And I'm like, is this supposed to be sarcastic? I was like, what affect is she saying this with? Because it's so contradictory to what we just heard.
Yeah, there's some of that where it's like I would imagine they turned this in right before the holidays, so they probably just wanted to get something in there, and they would come back probably sometime in like January or February and rework it again.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff I'm willing to forgive in the moment, but at the same time, though, a lot of that stuff feels so just randomly interjected that it feels less like Colin Trevorrow and more like a studio note.
That's interesting. That's an interesting point. Another line that stands out to me is, I think, Rose gets kidnapped by Hux at the end, and Hux is like, why'd you change the codes on the ship you stole? And she's like, because we stole it. And then she's like, I don't remember what they are. And she says something like, oh, I was going to make the code Life Day. And it's like, that has no point. That makes no sense, because even reading it and me knowing what Life Day is or represents in the Star Wars universe, it's like, why would that be a password? It's like, that just seems so weird if it's like my password for my computer was like Easter, you know?
Exactly. And the sad thing is, though, they use that exact same thing in The Mandalorian.
Yeah,
it's the exact same thing. I guess I'm not going to be home for Life Day.
Yeah.
And it's like, kill me. Oh, God. It's like, make it stop. That sort of stuff feels just like... And that's the weird thing, too, is that, like, if you have seen, like, a line of dialogue like that, if you haven't seen the holiday special, means nothing.
Exactly.
But if you have seen it, all it is what? Congratulating you on seeing one of the weirdest things you'll ever see in life?
Yeah, and it still is meaningless. You can take it and swap it out with anything else, and it's going to have the same impact. Exactly.
So it's like, I guess it's probably the only noteworthy Star Wars holiday, because I don't think in any of the films we ever talk about like any sort of major holidays or events.
Yeah, none that I can think of or remember.
Outside maybe the thing in the Rise of Skywalker with all the aliens doing their dance at space Coachella.
Oh no, yeah, whatever that thing is.
Whatever that was called.
Sand Planet Mardi Gras. Isn't that where Rey gets the beads and stuff like that?
Yes, exactly. It's the Star Wars equivalent of Mardi Gras and Coachella mixed in together. But they have puppet shows, so it has a weird child-friendly atmosphere to it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sort of stuff. Another aspect of this that I found, I don't want to know peculiar, but it's, I think you and I have mentioned it, and I think even Zenger and I talked about it, was the Rey Poe romance.
Yeah, I know we talked about it a little bit. This goes hard on it. Like they're really, there's tension between them for sure. And it's not something that I ever thought of when I saw episodes, 7 and 8. It's kind of like, oh, that's the romance. That's the love connection we get in this script. That's where he decided to fit it in.
That's the weird thing, though, with this. Is that, like, I know I've said it before, and I don't want to make a big point of it again, though, but there is the moment at the end of The Last Jedi with Poe and Rey, and I sensed it then, and as I was reading this, I'm like, okay, clearly that was being set up, and it went nowhere in Episode 9, in favor of Reylo. But the problem is that, like, I kind of like the romance being built up in this. Maybe I don't like, again, I have no problem if they would have done Rey and Poe together, but it feels like they're actually trying to build to a point. But the weird thing is this has the build up, but it has no payoff, because yes, they kiss, but Rey does it very begrudgingly, only because out of necessity. And then after that, it never comes up again.
Yeah. I noticed that as well, because, the whole end of this script becomes more of the, saving the galaxy and the moment, I guess, where Rey's on like the astral plane or something talking to Yoda, and they're like, you did what we didn't do. It goes a lot into that. But I actually really liked the Rey has to go to Mortis, and Poe's like, I don't care what you say, I'm coming with you. And she like Jedi mind tricks him. And there's like extended dialogue of him going like, don't do this to me. Like, what's this feeling? And I was like, oh, that's once again, something I've never seen in Star Wars. Mind tricks just work or they don't. And here it's like, it actually, she's doing it for necessity, but to one of the good guys.
Yeah, and I like the idea that again, I don't even know what to call it. I think love is too strong of a word. His affection for her is, I don't want to say overriding it. It takes an act to kind of like sweep him off his feet, to kind of really turn his mind off to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I like that. I think it's weird that, like you said, that it's one of those things where it's not. I don't want to say that's a problem. I don't want to say everything in Star Wars has to be set up, but it's the idea of there needs to be a little bit more romantic tension. Because I know a couple of times in the script, there's like stage directions that say like there's something here, that there's an attraction that's palpable, but that's never been discussed before.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, okay, you're giving this film a lot of heavy lifting, because it's weird to introduce a romance in the very last act. Because
Definitely.
If you think about the original trilogy, like even though there's really no romance between Han and Leia, you do have Han giving her the wink during the awards, the ceremony at the end, the throne room ceremony. So you do have that like setup, which I would imagine what The Last Jedi was trying to do, but you kind of needed that in The Force Awakens if you were going to make that a through line of the romance. And that's and this is where I think it's weird that where the Duel of Fates has all of the build up there, but no payoff. Yet The Rise of Skywalker has no direct buildup of the romance between Rey and Kylo Ren, but it has a much better actually has a payoff where the other one doesn't.
Yeah. It's interesting. If I remember correctly, don't Rey and Poe, they don't even meet in The Force Awakens, right? Like it takes till The Last Jedi for them to even know each other?
Well, in The Force Awakens, they are in the same like bunker, like on the Resistance planet. They don't interact. Apparently, in the novelization, they do meet.
Okay.
But obviously, that bit from the novelization was overridden by the events of The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they do not literally meet until the very last 5 minutes of The Last Jedi.
Yeah, that's just so strange. You know, it's like. I guess people are interested in that, you know, something that we've talked about before on Knights of Vader and Cinemoddities. You know, there's people who are like, they think of Breaking Bad a lot, and like Bryan Cranston's son in that show, and I think like Jesse Pinkman never ever meet. Like they never have any scene ever together. And people are like, isn't that crazy? And I'm like, what do you want? Like it's like the story works. You didn't need these two people to meet.
Yeah, and plus, again, Rian Johnson gets all the blame for that. Like, oh, can you believe how stupid he was? He didn't have them meet. It's like J.J. Abrams is the one that had them in the same room together for an entire scene and deliberately split them apart. Like, it's not like Ray could just automatically show up like in a, oh God, Skype call and be like, hi, Poe, I'm Ray. Hi, Ray, I'm Poe. Like, you can't do something that cheesy. But again, we blame the wrong people because people don't understand how movies work. But yeah, it's weird. I love the fact that The Rise of Skywalker very briefly goes all in with the romance. But I would have liked it if we did have more romantic tension. Sure. And I guess more blatant romantic tension in The Rise of Skywalker like the Duel of Fates does. Even if it's ham-fisted romantic tension. Because I do think... Yeah, like I don't know. There should have been a little bit more in The Rise of Skywalker, like when they're having their what are the Reylos calling it? They're calling the Death Star duel between Kylo Ren and Rey like the lightsaber sex scene. Much like we had hand touching sex in The Last Jedi, we have lightsaber sex. I would have liked it maybe at the end of that. There was instead of her just healing him, which I get. That's much more implicit and subtle, and I appreciate it for that level. But I do think I think there's a quote, if anyone's ever seen the Empire Dreams original trilogy documentary, where Irving Kershner's like, I want romance in this movie, but I don't want like blatant smooching. And I do think the healing, even though that conveys affection, I do think that could easily be interpreted as platonic affection. Sure. The idea of healing somebody's wounds that you caused, both of them, I don't think that's just automatically see that and you see that and you think, okay, this is romantic. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. I would agree. But yeah, that's one part. It's weird how one it's like one half. Only if you combine the two, you could have had this kind of almost ideal. It's weird how they both dropped the ball, but in completely different ways. Yeah, definitely. And I think on that same topic, he reading this script, and you know, when I did see The Rise of Skywalker, that we got this, it might be my favorite character in Star Wars, Chancellor Hux, because not only is he the spy in Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, but I was like laughing like crazy reading the Duel of the Fates script, and it's him trying to use the Force and not being able to use it.
And we get the greatest line I think I've ever read in a script, where Hux knows that the First Order's losing the battle, and I'm reading it right here. It's on page 116, and it's Hux realizes the tragic truth. He lost the Star Wars, and he lost the Star Wars is underlined, and I'm like, oh, that is gold.
Isn't it? It's like bolded too. It's like,
yep.
it's everything. Oh no, like we slightly hinted upon that in last week's episode. That is fantastic. The only problem is that it's not dialogue. That's
the only thing I could have hoped for, is that we get the snap zoom, just like Hux looks at the camera and says, "I'm the spy." I want the same thing, but he says, "I lost the Star Wars."
I you know what? I'm gonna have to repeat it because Rob hasn't heard it yet. But if I ever go to a convention and Domhnall Gleeson is there, I am going to spend the $500 and I'm going to record and say, I don't want a picture. I don't want your autograph. Please say, hi, I'm Domhnall Gleeson. You're listening to Knights of Vader, a Star Wars podcast, and I lost the Star Wars. I want that. I want that so bad. That is top tier. Like the only other thing I want as much as that is maybe Billy D. Williams saying something.
Okay.
Just because Billy D. Williams has a fantastic voice. But no, I lost to Star Wars is possibly the greatest words ever in Star Wars history.
Oh yeah, I love it. I got to that point and I was just like sold. Like this is everything I wanted from this script by Trevorrow and Connolly. Just this is it, embodied in a nutshell right there.
I have to ask though, how do you write that with a straight face? Like how do you submit that with a straight face? Like if you're an executive, like can you imagine this had to pass Kathleen Kennedy's hands? If you're her and you read that, like you have to be like these guys are jerks, right? Like you have to, there's a layer of, and I think that's why like Trevorrow has like this reputation in Hollywood. Is it like, I think in a weird way, Trevorrow's the closest thing we ever would have gotten to another George Lucas level auteur working on Star Wars.
Sure.
In that somebody was working on Star Wars and they have a layer of contempt for it.
Yeah, that's sure what it seems like. Maybe, like you said, this got to Kathleen Kennedy's hands and she read it and she was like, just, turns around and she just puts another strike mark next to Trevorrow's name. And maybe it was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Oh, wouldn't that be fantastic? She literally got to that point in the script and she's like, fire them.
Yeah. Oh, geez. So in that same bit where Hux loses the Star Wars, or he realizes he loses the Star Wars, he kills himself with one of this lightsaber that he has, and the script very notably says that he impales himself with a purple lightsaber. So is the implication that he has Mace Windu's lightsaber?
I would imagine so.
Is that another fan service? Yeah, that's when I think of purple lightsaber, I've heard, I think maybe not on Knights of Vader, but just from like the internet and stuff, that isn't he like the only one with a purple lightsaber, Mace Windu? I haven't. I know. I think the problem is that I would imagine in the EU they probably had other purple ones. Oh,
I'm
sure.
almost certain in canon he's the only one that had one. I think even in Legends EU at one point I think Boba Fett got the lightsaber because the lightsaber we see the lightsaber go out the window on Coruscant.
Yes.
So that lightsaber, much like Luke's, is still floating around somewhere.
Sure.
So I would imagine that it has to be, especially if we're on Coruscant.
Mm-hmm.
If we were on a different planet and this was all happening, I'd be like, well, 50-50 depends on how just fan servicey they want to be. But the fact that it's on Coruscant and like you said, it's specifically noted that's purple, I can't help but feel that it would have to be a callback.
Okay, yeah, sure. It seemed like it, and and like we said with the rest of the script being so fan servicey, that would just be another thing to easily throw in there for them writing it.
But that's even though I think the dialogue that's fan servicey is over the top and unnecessary, I think when the fan service is woven into the script and the fabric of the story of the Duel of Fates, it understands fan service, I think, better than any of the other films have.
Okay, interesting.
Because you do have things like, I know in the concept art, and we'll get to that in a moment, because since we've started the series, we haven't talked about any of the concept art that's leaked, and I'll include that in the show notes if you haven't seen that already. I know Rey is wearing an outfit in this that's very similar to Luke's in Return of the Jedi. It's the black with like the little like oh god, I don't know my fashion with the part that's like peeled back that has the white underneath.
Oh, sure, like the the lapel or something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say lapel, but I didn't know if that was the correct word for it.
Okay. Yeah. Comment down below if you think we're terrible fashion people, because Zach and I are.
Even though that's fan servicey,
Mm-hmm.
I like that more than Rey wearing the exact same outfit she wore in The Force Awakens, but it being a brighter like white hue.
Sure. Yeah. Change it up. Can't go wrong with that. Yeah.
Sure, and it's there to also, much like Luke's outfit in Return of the Jedi, it's there to convey the turmoil and the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I think that it would given her, she would have stood out a lot more. I know in a couple of the pieces of concept art, it shows her with this outfit.
Yeah.
And I think her thing is very stark compared to anything that we saw her in any of the previous movies. Even though Last Jedi, she only wears her outfit toward the second and third act.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's much more striking than just kind of like the very muted like grays and blues and whites she wears in that film. I would have definitely preferred that, even if it is derivative of Return of the Jedi, because at least it adds to Rey's character arc by the end of the film. The idea of having to oh God, what's the word for it? It's late. I'm tired. Oh God, Rob, what's the word for it?
Be the harbinger of?
No. I guess to reconcile both the darkness and the light at the same time.
I get what you're saying now. Like the balance idea that we get at the end of this script and showing that off in a visual sense. Yeah.
Sure. You can't just, you have to have both. No one is completely pure and no one's completely evil either. You have to. Yeah. So there's that balance that she needs to embody. And I like that. That's the sort of fan service that I'm willing to do, because obviously Rey's not wearing the same clothes that Luke did how many years prior.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the sort of stuff I like, because even we get some of the more fans. I don't want to say fan service. That's not fair. But like we get Kylo Ren and Rey fighting toward the end of the film, and she has what everybody always wanted, the double-bladed lightsaber, like that's been like, it's her staff that's been retrofitted.
Yeah, I was surprised that the script didn't do more with that. At least I know, of course, it's going to be a very visual thing, but it's mentioned at the beginning when Rey is introduced to on that opening mission, and it like describes the lightsaber and how she's able to use it. And then I totally forgot that she even had it. So it mentions it again in that final act, that battle that we've been talking about, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, I guess.
Well, yeah, because she uses it at the very beginning when they're escaping the Kuat shipyards. Mm-hmm. She uses it against the Knights of Ren on I don't even know what kind of planet you would call it. It's like the weird, like tropical. Like I couldn't even describe the planet until I saw the concept art for it.
Yeah,
but the planet's described as having like all these like loading docks for ships that like rotate. Mm-hmm. It's something, if anybody's ever seen Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, it's kind of like the ending of that with the automated parking garage, where it's just like all these platforms that are automated and lower and raised ships. And apparently we have a fight on this thing where the platforms are going up and down, side to side, and Rey is fighting the Knights of Ren while Chewbacca and Poe are shooting at them. Mm-hmm. And she uses it again during the third act. So she really only uses the lightsaber in 3 instances.
Yeah, and I did like that. I guess the middle battle with the Knights of Ren, I thought that was interesting. It piqued my interest, at least, And once again, like we're just reading the script, but I thought it was written well, in that sense.
Yeah, because like even looking at the concept art, the planet's name is called Bonadin. Mm-hmm. That gave, from the very limited art that we have, like that gave me a very like Morocco vibe. Like in the sense, like you have this kind of like, I don't want to say lush world, but you have this kind of it feels very like rocky and stuff, but it also feels like it's teeming with a lot of life and vegetation.
Okay.
But you do have like this sort of like opulence.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
I'm looking at that those pictures of it now, and yeah, I see what you're saying for sure. It's got like a little bit of like almost an Italian vibe, like the Cinque Terre, got all these buildings lit up on the mountainside type of thing. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, and it feels, it's something different. Because that's another thing too I've been thinking about the Rise of Skywalker, is that you look at the Rise of Skywalker, and on a a visual level, I think it's a very boring film.
Okay.
Or just very tedious, because like the film begins with, yes, you have, I'm ignoring Mustafar, but you have the Resistance planet, Ajas Kloss, or however it's pronounced, and it's essentially Yavin mixed with Endor.
Sure.
Then we go to Pisana, and Pisana is it's Tatooine, it's Jakku, it's Jeddah. It's the exact same thing we've seen before. Then we go to Kef Bur, or however it's pronounced, and that's Endor. It's just a little bit more dirt, has more dirt and less vegetation than Endor did. And it's like, okay, and Exegol at least is a little bit different, but there's really nothing there other than just blue hues. It's the lightning blue hue planet, and it begins and ends there. And that's where, with looking at the Duel of Fates concept art, it seems like a much more visually interesting film than what we got.
I would have to agree, especially in the scene where they get they send the Leia's transmission out to the whole galaxy pretty much, and we get all the stuff like the dialogue spread out because it switches the exterior shots and different planets and people looking at it. And I think that would have been really neat to see, to show off kind of all these planets that are kind of inconsequential in this grand scheme of things, but just to kind of add to those visual flair. And the way that they described, Connolly and Trevorrow described Mortis and like the visions of Mortis, I was like, oh wow, I would have loved to see that, make it like a big grand locale for these big fights, and sure, in what we got in Rise of Skywalker, the Death Star wreckage stuff is neat, for what it is, but like you said, it's just somewhere we've been before.
Yeah. And for the record, I didn't mean, when I said Morocco, I meant Monaco. I got my countries confused.
Okay.
Because it is. Because I looked up like Morocco, and I'm like, this isn't what I'm really getting at. And I typed in Monaco, and it's very Monaco-esque in that sense. But no, the Mortis thing at the end, I don't know. Like, again, you watched the Mortis trilogy.
Yep.
And I don't know how they could have explained that to filthy casuals.
That's a good point. Yeah, now that I have seen that Mortis stuff, and you've just talked about the finer details of it way back when we did that episode, I was certainly aware of it. It'd be interesting to know how I would have reacted if I wasn't in some way. But I guess, once again, I'm biased for the reason I just said, but they do some, the dialogue at least does some work in trying to say that it's like, the birthplace of the Force, like the center of the start of the galaxy or the universe or something like that. And so that might seem like heady or maybe too mystical to just throw at somebody, but at least, it wasn't, it's set up somehow. But I get what you're saying. It would be tough to sell that to mass audiences.
I like that as an individual, like me being Zach, the person that likes weird crap. I like that, the idea of going to a place that like you don't really understand how it works. And they've always, even to this day, Lucasfilm has been very guarded about what Mortis is and how it just operates.
Sure.
But I just like, I know we have that one character, not Babu Frick, that explains all this to Rey. And it's like, that's just, because remember, even from Mortis, you can't go to Mortis. It's more of a state of mind. Because if you remember from the Clone Wars episode, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka are like flying to like a distress beacon.
Yep. And
then the ship gets supposedly like dragged into some sort of like atmosphere. And then at the end of that arc, they like wake up in the ship and they're like, was it Rex is on the Star Destroyer being like, excuse me, it's like, you got Commander Skywalker, come in. We lost you there for a second. Like, What do you mean for a second? We've been gone for weeks. No, sir. It's been like 5 seconds since your last communication. And that's why even with the very end of this, where we have the fight between Kylo Ren and Rey, and he's killed, it's like, oh, how does Rey, I don't want to say escape, but how does she leave this place?
Yeah, exactly. And because, it was weird to, Rey gets, a map to Mortis, and she's just able to, to beat the Knights of Ren, take their ship and go there. But they do some of that stuff where, I don't know, I guess maybe a good way to think about it is like Mortis is kind of like folded in the universe, like you can't always get there. Because they say, it's like Rey goes through like a black hole or something at light speed to get there. And then it's like, well, how are you going to get out of that one?
Well, it's funny when you mention that, what movie I thought of?
What?
Interstellar.
Well,
It felt
of course.
just like it felt like Interstellar, where it's like Tars.
Matt
help you.
Damon.
No, he's dead by that point. He already blew up the ship.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay.
Oh, God, it's like, and we go through the Tesseract prism of all the different bookcases.
Yeah, yep. And then you end up on Mortis.
Yes, and at one point, Ray just starts screaming, "Murph, Murph!"
Now, see, that would have made me more interested in Interstellar if he ends up in Mortis at the end. If Christopher Nolan did a Star Wars tie-in.
But I think that's the thing about ending the film with Mortis is that, like, if you think about Interstellar in the end with the I already said the word, the oh my god, I said what was the Tesseract,
Yeah.
with all the different libraries or the bedrooms. Is that during that entire sequence where Matthew McConaughey's like, what is this place? Tars is the Deus Ex Machina explaining how it works. And you can't have Mortis, because even think back to Clone Wars. You have the father explain that to the characters every single time a question comes up.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, like, you can't have this world that's essentially just like a video game level for the protagonist and the antagonist to fight each other. It feels like you're cheapening Mortis. Like, not that, because I also don't want to fall into the trap of everything in Star Wars needs to be explained, but it's just like Mortis is just one of those like Star Wars enigmas that, like, if you are gonna show it, you have to explain just how crazy it is.
Okay.
It's like, imagine, Rob, like, you're watching Twin Peaks and you go, like, imagine, like, oh god, Rob knows his Twin Peaks terminology better than I do, but like the place where David Bowie Tea Kettle lives. Imagine
the I think it's the
White Lodge.
No, it's called something like the place above the gas station or something like that. It's probably part of one of the lodges, but it has some other specific name.
Sure,
but who is Judy?
Yes, but imagine if you had that in Star Wars and you don't explain it at all. Like, that would be really like, where'd Ray go? What is this place? And I feel like if they actually did this, it would be a very similar thing to like Darth Maul at the end of Solo, where it would be like like the Star Wars fans would have to explain to the normies what's happening at the end.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I'm thinking about in Rise of Skywalker that we do have, it's not to say that we don't have these things that have led to questions, but it's not stuff that, would require, like you said, the diehard fans explaining it to other people. Like, just nobody understands how Palpatine has a kid, just period. And that's kind of, they can get away with it more because it's not something that's been explained elsewhere or, really requires explanation at the end of the day.
But that's the weird thing, though. Okay, well, this is the thing, though, is that, like, in The Rise of Skywalker, they could have said, oh, Rey, you're a Palpatine. And you can leave it at that. Yet they have to have this stupid flashback of two random actors as her parents being like, and telling, what's his name, Sochi, the Jedi Hunter, we'll never tell you where she is. It's like, it doesn't matter. Rey is a Palpatine. You don't need to have a stupid scene with two characters we've never seen before. You make your creative decision, you run with it.
Sure.
The audience is either going to accept Rey as a Palpatine or they're not. Having a bunch of random actors just reinforce that is not in the way that they did. I'm not saying you couldn't do more, you couldn't do something different with it, but just having that, and that's the thing that I have to admit I like with this, is that it kind of assumes that, like, okay, you're along for the ride now. We're not going to have to spoon feed you a lot of this stuff.
Yeah,
and that's
which makes sense for the end of a saga, of a trilogy, that it should be set up in some sense, and people they know that the fans or the audience is on board because they are seeing the third in a trilogy, the ninth in a whole saga.
But I'm not even looking at it as in like a film that has to like repeat itself to as to what happened earlier. I kind of like a Palpatine's line at the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker, where Kylo Ren's like, "How are you still alive?" And he's like, "The dark side is a pathway to many abilities." And forget that that's fan service. That's first and foremost, that's fan service. But once again, they're trying to explain Palpatine's return very implicitly. And and to the people out there that are mad, because I think in some interview, Daisy Ridley's like, oh, Palpatine's return is explained in the film. And people are mad, like, oh, why didn't we get that? And it's because it doesn't matter. He's back. You don't need to explain it. Palpatine is this evil Sith wizard that just can do whatever the hell he wants. you don't need to, there's certain things in Star Wars you don't need to explain. It happened. Deal with it. Move on. It kind of reminds me of like the beginning of Iron Man 2, where they like introduced Don Cheadle as War Machine.
Oh, yeah.
And like it's like, well, God, the Congress hearing, and it's like, oh, we have Colonel Rhodes, and it's like a shot from the back as like Don Cheadle walks in, and it's like, Robert Downey Jr. is like, oh, I know you're coming. He's like, I'm here, just deal with it. And that's all that matters. Like it's like it's like, I'm here, deal with it. And that's what I like about the Duel of Fate script, is that there's a lot of just Star Warsy stuff that comes out of nowhere, and we don't harp on it. Like the idea of I forget the main Knight of Ren. That's I guess Kylo Ren's like inadvertent top lieutenant. That like,
it's like Hataska or something like that.
Yeah, that apparently lives like in a rehabilitation chamber on their ship, and it's never explained. It's just like, oh, there's this thing, and it's like, okay. I'm like, that's great. Like that's the thing about the Knights of Ren, is that like, if you are going to focus on them, for every moment that you give them more of a spotlight, you have to create another enigma for them at the same time.
Sure.
For and I think that's the weird thing, is like, in a weird way, like this script, I have to say, is the most coherent Trevorrow thing I've ever consumed.
I was a little surprised as I was reading through it, and I'm like, this seems normal, for what I was expecting.
Exactly, compared to the guy that makes Jurassic World, and it's like, oh, or Dinosaur Boogaloo, where it's like, oh, dinosaur auction, a dinosaur that winks into the camera. Like, even though that's still one of the greatest moments in film history, it's just the notion of what, is he competent, or is it Derek Connolly who's competent, or is it that maybe one of them just like reins the other one in a little bit? Like I wonder how many interviews there are about the two of them, like how their symbiotic relationship is when it comes to writing. Obviously Trevorrow being the writer and the co-writer and the director, and Connolly just being a writer. I wonder what sort of influence that has, or maybe Connolly writes a lot of this stuff, and then it's Trevorrow's job to kind of bring it to the screen. So maybe he's a little less hands-on.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know about them, to really kind of get into the finer details and maybe the sense of mystery behind, like our Book of Henrys and our Jurassic World 2 Dinosaur Boogaloo, and those types of ideas, and getting fleshed out. And like even we said with this script, I would love to know, with Hux saying, he lost the Star Wars. Was that something they both were like, oh yeah, let's do it, this is great? Or was it one of them, or maybe they kind of went back and forth? It'd be neat to know.
Well, a little bit of, I guess, peek behind the curtain. It doesn't seem like Derek Connolly was involved at all with the Book of Henry.
Okay. So that would make me think that Derek Connolly's the one doing some reining in.
Yes, but I'm pretty sure he co-wrote Dinosaur Boogaloo.
Okay.
So that's like, and I think it's fair to say, Rob, as much as we like to laugh at Dinosaur Boogaloo, I think we both understand that's the more, as strange, it pains me to say this, the more coherent between the two films in the Trevorrow filmography. Yeah,
if I remember my dinosaur movies correctly, I would think so.
Yeah, Dinosaur Boogaloo is much more normal than the Book of Henry.
Sure, that definitely, and because at least I think we said it before, whether it be on here or Cinemoddities, there is some kind of dinosaur movie like Star Wars. They're already grounded in fantasy and sci-fi, and I think we're more receptive to just like letting certain things fly. Where Book of Henry is grounded in reality, and that just adds to the insanity of it.
Yeah, I think so. But I think that's the weird thing with Star Wars too, that there are some things in this that I can't help but feel that Star Wars fans would tear it apart. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if Lucasfilm ever looks at these films under that sort of lens. Like when they're reading a script like this, and I would imagine they're scrutinizing this thing up, down, sideways, every way possible. But I wonder if there's a layer of, you can't have a character like Tor Valum because the fans are going to be upset that where was this character?
Mm-hmm.
Why wasn't
I never heard about him before? Yep.
And I wonder if they look at it that way, because that's a very Star Warsy nerd. That's a comic book guy level criticism.
Sure.
And I wonder if that's the sort of thing they scrutinize, because there are other things. Some even like we haven't even talked about the like Finn's part in this, where him and Rose go to Coruscant to reset the beacon. They get split apart, and Finn out of nowhere leads a rebellion of thousands on Coruscant against the First Order.
Yep.
And that sort of stuff where I don't know, that's something new in Star Wars. The idea of having a character that's a turncoat eventually lead the rebellion. Like, think about all of our heroes are always introduced as, for the most part, heroes. Again, Han Solo comes and goes because of the whole shooting Greedo. Mm-hmm. But our heroes are almost always established as heroes. We outside of maybe Darth Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi, him throwing the Emperor down the chasm, most of our protagonists, and yes, Finn is a good guy first and foremost, but the idea that Finn has such a huge character arc, from going from a stormtrooper that has a change of heart in a moment of crisis to I am leading a rebellion of thousands. Yeah,
that stood out to me in this script as well, for sure, because if I remember correctly, Finn has almost nothing to do in the episode 9 we do have. But it makes it, when I was reading this script, it made me think of something that you said to me and on this podcast multiple times, where you were, before episode 9 came out, you always made that point where you think that the first and the third in the trilogy are going to be more tied to each other than the one in the middle, like the Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. And that's the sense I got from the Finn stuff, because that's a big part of The Force Awakens, at least from my memory, is that, he defects to the rebellion. He wants to get away from the First Order. And then in this one, he really kind of finishes that arc where he gets others to follow in his footsteps, and, because he knows it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And like you said, in The Rise of Skywalker, he leads the assault on the First Order Star Destroyer. He does lead that. Mm-hmm. So I guess you get a very smaller scale version of that from what the Duel of Fates was trying to do. But at no point in the Duel of Fates do we have, once again, Finn going on a suicide run.
Yeah, true.
Because that's what's so weird too, is like at the end of The Last Jedi, he's going to crash his ship into the Death Star air cannon, mm-hmm. and Rose saves him. And then at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, he's going to blow up the command ship, and he's, once again, suicide run.
Yeah.
And it's like, so the character, not even worse than just like not learning his lesson the first time, he's regressed. He's doing the exact same thing again.
Oh yeah, it's good. I didn't think about it that way, but yeah.
Instead of having Rose show up and kind of sideswipe his ski speeder, Lando shows up and they hop on. It's like, it's just, there's a lot of that in The Rise of Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker objectively has a lot of problems. It does. Like, it's one of those films I think it reminds me, the people who love it, and I am in that boat, it's like what happened with Attack of the Clones. Like even though I was only 9 years old at that time, I can still remember like everybody talking about Yoda. Oh my God, that like Yoda fights the guy at the end. That's you see Yoda do things you never thought he could do before. Mm-hmm. And everybody talked about that until we just stopped.
Sure.
And think about it. If you want if you ask people in May of 2002, name your top 5 Star Wars moments, that would without a doubt be in their top 5. Without a doubt, It would be up there. And I get it. We have a lot more content now. A lot has changed in almost 20 years. But if you were to ask people now to rank your favorite or most important Star Wars moments, I'd be shocked if that made someone's top 20.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I remember that even back in the day, everybody talking about Yoda flipping around.
Well, there's even if anybody has their Attack of the Clones DVD, there's a TV spot on there, and it's a pretty clever piece of marketing. And it begins, and it has the same like Sony Spider-Man font, and it's using all these like double entendres with like swinging and oh God, I forget like whatever sort of Spider-Man words there are.
Sure, yeah.
And it's like take the ultimate like swing, have the like all these stuff like this, and it cuts to Yoda like doing the thing in Attack of the Clones where he puts the lightsaber in his hand with the Force, and it's him doing the he's like swinging. It's like Attack of the Clones now in theaters. I didn't start the clip, but it's all like visually based. There's really there's no voiceover. It's probably on YouTube. Go look it up if you haven't already, people. If I can, I'll put it in the show notes, but I don't know if it's on YouTube. But that's the sort of thing that, like, in the Rise of Skywalker, it's like I don't think there's a lot of great like moments in the Rise of Skywalker you can point to and be like, oh, like that's one of my new favorite moments of the series. Like, yes, you have the kiss at the end, and I absolutely love Palpatine Monster Mash. Just every single scene he's in, he's phenomenal. But that's more a character as opposed to a sequence.
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing. Like, you think about like Last Jedi, you have Luke Skywalker at the end. You have Snoke getting cut in half. You have all these really like iconic moments, for better or worse, depending what your opinion on the film is. Even The Force Awakens has Chewie, we're home. It has Luke Skywalker at the end on top of the hill. You have Rey pulling the lightsaber into her hands. And I don't need to go through the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy's moments, but think about the Rise of Skywalker. It's like, where's that iconic moment?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think now it's been proven to me the thing that I remember the most from the Rise of Skywalker is I'm the spy, and that's not for the reasons that they want us to remember things from Star Wars. That's for the opposite reason, because it just plays so comically.
Yeah. I do have to say, though, is that another like accolade for this script, it really handles Hux well.
Yeah, like I said, I really liked him trying to use the Force and not being able to do it, and being like kind of a like a Force and lightsaber and Jedi fanboy almost type of thing. It was interesting.
But he obviously, again, it's the show. I remember once Pablo Hidalgo was saying, and this is in regards to Kylo Ren, that he was meant to be like an embodiment of the original trilogy fan, or the original trilogy purist, and that he's this person that's obsessed with that era, and he wants to wipe out any remnants of anything that's outside of that era. And I've always found that interesting as a concept, even though maybe it's not 100% in the film.
Sure.
But I like the idea of Hux being this, like, maybe, and again, this is my own interpretation, being, like you said, this fanboy, and he thinks he can, harness this power simply by collecting things. And it's that Star Wars fandom thing of like, okay, I'm going to be the biggest Star Wars fan, not because I understand these movies, but because I'm just going to keep just accumulating a collection of it.
Yeah, that is a neat idea. You know, it's kind of like he sees these Jedi or Kylo Ren or Force users, and it's like, well, I want to be like one of them, so I got to get the gear first, you know? Yep. They have lightsabers. I need one of those. They wave their hands. I got to do that too. And it's almost, there's that disconnect that he doesn't realize that, you know, it takes something more than that to become one of those people.
Yeah, and I think it also makes Hux a real character, because I think any Star Wars fan at some point in their life has raised their hand to something hoping that it moves.
Sure.
and I think there's that human element to it too that makes Hux a real character. He's not just like, oh good Lord, scene chewing guy from the first film, comedic relief in the second film, and just a character that needs to be disposed of in the third film.
Yeah. And it did flesh him out a little bit more, and I think that's, like I said earlier, what I liked about it. It's still goofy, you know, like the I'm the spy thing, but it gave it a little more depth behind it.
Yeah, like you can, like, again, there's a lot of goofy. Like, I think about Star Wars too. Everybody has to stop putting Star Wars on a pedestal. That you got to stop looking at this stuff as if it were perfect. There's a lot of goofy things in this entire series, whether it be the sequels, the prequels, or the original trilogy. Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's just, it's goofy. Like, I know a lot of people, again, everybody worships Empire, but like you look at, like, if you're not a diehard Star Wars fan, you look at the Dagobah cave sequence with Luke, and he chops the head off, and it just like he swipes at the head, and it just falls off, and then it explodes, and you see a face. Like, that's comical if you're not a Star Wars fan. It's like, what is going on? It's like, and I get it. I get the symbolism of it all, but like, it's goofy, like in that sort of way to explain that, like, oh, Luke's, like, think about it, Luke's afraid of becoming, or it's supposed to show Luke the folly of his ways if he pursues a very specific path, that he will turn into Vader. Instead of getting a sequence that shows like how power can corrupt, we just get the good guy's head smushed in the bad guy's helmet.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. So like, that's the sort of thing that, like, if that was done, I know we have a sequence in this where Kylo Ren fights Force Ghost Darth Vader.
Yep.
And even though I don't like that as a concept, because I think they would have really made Vader into like a cartoon character. Like, they would have had him again flipping around, doing Lord knows what. Yeah. And Vader should always be like the equivalent of a tank. Is that like, he should never move fast.
I agree. I didn't think about it that way, but that would have been ridiculous to see it, Darth Vader be more comical, because, I think that's the one thing that everybody can agree on. Darth Vader's been done right. They don't need to do him in any other way, He's great in the original trilogy, and then we got that awesome scene from Rogue One where, like you said, he's just a tank, and that's it. We don't need to change that, Leave some things be.
Yeah, and that's part of the brilliance, too, of Rogue One, is that, like, you think about, and this is maybe more the video game aspect of these characters, is that, like, if you are Darth Vader, and even though, yes, he has all these magical powers, but if you're this, like, half-man cybernetic organism, and you have all this, like, machinery, you're not going to be able to move fast.
Yeah.
Like, every movement you make has to be deliberately coordinated and choreographed. So you have to, like, when you walk into a room with the intention of killing somebody or a group of people, you have to have formulated out how you're going to do this in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the brilliance of Rogue One, is that we don't have Vader flipping around. Like you said, he's our good guys, the group of fleet troopers, are literally fish in a barrel. And he's going to plow through them until something eventually stops him, which is the ship leaving the larger ship. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing. I think even though it's a vision, so it's not Vader in the flesh, I think you're robbing that character of just how unique he is by having him. And again, we don't know. That's all we have is concept art in the script. But by living in today's current era, you can't help but assume they would make it over the top.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that would, I don't know, like seeing Darth Vader do something with any real sense of mobility or like acrobatics, just it feels so weird to me, when I hear it and say it. It's like, imagine if RoboCop flipped around at the end of RoboCop, how strange that would be.
I'm pretty sure he does that, like they did the RoboCop remake.
Oh, yeah, I never saw that.
I think that's what it would have been. Like I know, like in the RoboCop remake, he does things like that, and I think that's what it would have been. It's just like, because you know why? It's that. I think I've referenced it before, but I remember when Honest Trailers did their like thing for the original RoboCop. Like they did their one for like when the new RoboCop came out, like 6 years ago now, maybe even longer. And I remember them talking about it like in one of their commentaries. And they're like, if you look at the comments for that like video, all this is a bunch of 13-year-olds saying about how stupid the effects look.
Oh, geez.
and that's the problem, is that like, and that's kind of where the point where Star Wars is going, where like they want new fans, but the new fans want a video game.
Yeah, they want something that's so different from what Star Wars has been for a long time. And
it's not even what it's been. It's just practical. Like, if you want, like, it makes sense for, like, that's the weird thing, too, about, like the duel between Rey and Kylo Ren on the Death Star wreckage. And yes, there's a lot of flipping, and there's much more flipping and twirling in that. Mm-hmm. It's the most prequel-esque duel in the series when you compare it to things like Duel of the Fates, as in The Phantom Menace, or Obi-Wan versus Anakin in Revenge of the Sith. Sure. But still, like, you think at this point, think about it, we're introduced to Rey in The Rise of Skywalker, and she's levitating off the ground with 24 rocks around her, clearly signifying that she's much more powerful than when we left her a year prior. And Kylo Ren, again, we're introduced to him in the beginning of the film, just slaughtering a group of people to he's literally the last man standing.
Yep.
So you would think that they would have gone a little bit more over the top, considering these are both young people. Again, by the events of The Rise of Skywalker, I think Kylo Ren is 30 and Rey is 20. So it would make sense to have people of that age have the ability to flip, twirl, be a little bit more, embellish the choreography of the fight scenes.
Sure, yeah.
And I think that's part of the J.J. Abrams practical effects real sets, in that the original trilogy didn't do this, thus we can't do it. And the only reason why the original trilogy wasn't that way is because they were limited by the technology.
Yeah, exactly. So that sounds like it's a sense of, J.J. Abrams being such a nostalgia ridden kind of with these ideas, at least in Star Wars, and taking it in a good way, Because there's kind of it's kind of, I feel like, maybe a split even between the nostalgia of appreciating what the original trilogy did and at the same time not going overboard because you can do it now.
Well, that's but I disagree with that, though. I would have preferred having you're never going to be able to outdo the episode 1 duel. You're never going to
Sure.
be able to outdo that because you have Darth Maul, Obi-Wan, Anakin. They're just that whole fight is very kinetic. There's never a dull moment there. Even if you hate the Phantom Menace, you have to admire just the orchestration of it all. It really is something to marvel at. But I do think, like, you think about that duel, like, and I think even in the soundtrack for The Rise of Skywalker, the track that plays over that sequence of the film is called The Final Duel. And it's really just a bunch of them. They like, Rey walks away from, I'm sorry, how that begins. Kylo Ren hops off the throne room, and they kind of clash blades a couple of times. Then she jumps away from him. He follows after her. They clash a couple more times. She does like a flip backwards and does an Iron Man-esque landing.
Yep.
And it's like, that's kind of it. And like, you think about that, like that sequence, like they're fighting on the wreckage of the Death Star in the water during a rainstorm. And this is the best you could come up with? Like, you couldn't hire a sword fighting choreographer?
That's an interesting point. I guess, I've never thought about it that way, but from what I remember, that whole scene, sure, we get a battle, and I didn't know about the soundtrack, the final duel, that type of thing, but that whole kind of fight was more, I don't know, it seemed more mental rather than physical, because isn't that the whole where she stabs him, she gets healed, or he heals, somebody heals somebody else, Leia reaches out to him, Han Solo shows up afterwards, or something like that.
The part where she impales him, or I'm sorry, when you have the part where Kylo Ren is going to kill her, like he has her cornered, and Leia distracts him long enough that Rey impales him. I'm not talking about that. That I have no problem with.
Okay.
I want a little bit more embellishment in the sword fighting. If you are going to have the final lightsaber duel of the Skywalker saga, quote unquote.
Fair.
I think especially you have a really fun environment. Have the rain, have the water play an effect into it. Because think of like all the stuff like in the Phantom Menace. Like, there's even, I'm not sure how many fans even recognize this, but in the duel in the Phantom Menace, very early on where all these Star Wars names, it's driving me crazy. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are kind of going after Maul, and they're still like in the hangar on Naboo before they go into the generator complex. Yeah. There is a door behind Maul as he's backing up, and with the Force, he takes a scrap piece or a piece of a battle droid and throws it with the Force at the door control so it opens. The camera at no point ever focuses on this. It's just there happening in the background very subtly. And that's the sort of stuff that, like, I think would be really fun in this. Like, imagine like Rey's hopping backwards and it's like, a piece of the metal's up. So we see her bend it down with the Force. And then she has to kind of, walk across it. And it's a very narrow piece of metal or something like that.
Something to show off a little more strategy rather than just, kind of, like you said, clash, jump away. Something to illustrate a little more of, how these people have grown in their abilities. Sure,
because if you look at that duel on the Death Star wreckage, on a visual level, nothing's happening. And on a subtextual level, nothing is happening. Because prior to that, she finds the Wayfinder, Kylo Ren rips it out of her hands, he crushes it, and she starts to swipe at him out of frustration and anger.
Okay.
And that's it. So why are they fighting? Like, they're only fighting because even prior to that, like when she's swiping at him, he doesn't even take out his lightsaber. He dodges all of her attacks just by maneuvering certain ways, which I think is great. Like, I thought that was really cool. The idea that he's learned so much since their first confrontation on Starkiller Base, where she gets the better of him, that he's gotten to a point in his training and just prowess with a lightsaber that he's able to dodge her attacks without ever having to take out his blade. I think that is really neat. And yes, you can't have that for an entire sequence because then it gets boring and just you lose the effect. So I know he's got to pull out the lightsaber at some point, but they're fighting for, it seems like, no other reason than just the script is telling them to fight.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, for sure.
Like, you juxtapose that to the duel in Revenge of the Sith, and Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting for two very specific reasons. Anakin is fighting because Obi-Wan brought Padme here and exposed me for what I've become. Yeah. He now has to die because out of retribution. Obi-Wan goes to Anakin because he must now be punished for what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
That is a fight. And I think that's why I think it's wrong to say the Phantom Menace duel is the best duel of the saga, because there's really no deep meaning to the Phantom Menace duel.
Okay.
Other
yeah,
than
it's just they got to get the bad guy at the end.
Yes. It's like, okay, and we have our lightsaber sequence now. But I'm willing to forgive that because that's the first time we've ever seen that sort of thing in Star Wars. So it being that first really big spectacle lightsaber duel, it's like, okay, I'm fine. I'm willing to forgive it for that, for not having that layer of symbolism. But in The Rise of Skywalker, you think after 3 movies, Kylo Ren and Rey have fought against each other, fought back to back with each other now. You think you would have a really deep meaning to their duel. And I think that's something the Duel of Fates, the film, or the script accomplishes, in that Rey isn't just simply confronting Kylo Ren because the script calls for them to have a lightsaber sequence. He's there because on Mortis, because if he sits in one of these thrones, or I'm not sure, does he consume? What's his goal there? To consume Mortis?
Yeah,
I
think
what his goal is.
He goes into the temple and finds that like kind of big well, and it seems like that's the source of power, or in some to some extent.
Sure. Okay. Fine. There's a reason for it. She has to confront him because if she doesn't, the universe is at risk.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. And plus, you can add a retribution level to Kylo Ren. Like this is the scavenger girl. Who are you to challenge my position in all this? You can throw in a layer there. But I think that's an element. Again, it shows either intentionally or unintentionally a greater understanding of the Star Wars mythos than The Rise of Skywalker does.
Okay.
And again, like I still think the thing with Mortis is still too convoluted for everybody.
Sure.
But at least explaining Mortis as being just this giant, just artery of the Force, that if you somehow tap into it, you have control over it in a way nothing else can.
Yeah. It's it makes sense, like we were saying earlier, for the end of this trilogy saga to have kind of the end all power to be revealed type of thing. Yeah.
I think you need that. And I think that's, like we said earlier, there is a grandiose level to the conclusion here that's not felt in The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, because it is just, it's Palpatine. And like you said, we love that stuff when he goes like crazy at the end, and monster mash, as you always say. But it's kind of almost, like once again, we've seen it before, and it didn't really let, say, our characters, Rey and Kylo, be fleshed out like they do seem to be a little more at the end of the Duel of the Fates script.
Yeah, because even like you think of the climax of The Rise of Skywalker, it's like Rey just pushes his lightning back at him, and that's how she beats him.
Yeah.
And even though I like that moment, it's like, oh, so you're telling me Mace Windu was that close? He was that close to like stopping all this? If only he had a second lightsaber, instead of telling Anakin like he's too dangerous to be kept alive, if he would have force pulled Anakin's lightsaber, you're telling me we could have stopped all this?
Hindsight.
Yeah, it's like I get it. I'm being cynical. And I don't want to do that, but that sort of thing is like you're defeating Palpatine once and for all, and I have all the ways to kill a bad guy. Doing something we've already seen before is how you're going to do it.
Exactly.
Instead of maybe having Palpatine be consumed by his own power, like maybe he like does this like force lightning into the sky, and maybe he does it to a point where like it almost like his power consumes him to the point where it just, and I can't believe I'm making this connection here, but kind of like the ending of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull with oh god, what's her name? Ivana
woman?
Yeah, Ivana Spankoff or something, whoever her name is. And like she's like, I want your power, and the crystal aliens are like, okay, you want the power? Here's the power, and it destroys her. And I think maybe that's the idea, is like the folly of the villain's ways, that like, okay, I want this power, and in my hubris, this power inherently is going to destroy me. Sure. And I think that could have, and I get it, that's not as, and it goes back to, you need the good guy to defeat the bad guy. You need that visual, easy digestible thing of the good guy winning. But I do think there's a way to do that that's just not something so derivative. Yeah, that's.
I forgot about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I haven't thought about that in years.
Good old Kate Blanchett as a Russian woman.
Isn't the power like knowledge, or isn't it some stupid line at the end of that movie where it's like, oh, the old ancient Mayan word for treasure actually means knowledge or friendship or something dumb like that?
Well, I've never had a problem with Crystal Skull. Like, yes, is it not as good as other Indiana Jones films? Sure. But I've never minded that as a plot point where, like, okay, and I think that's a really clever, again, the dirty word in the Star Wars fandom, subversion. I think that's clever. The idea, like, the bad guy goes in there and it's like, okay, haha, I'm going to win. And the aliens, or whatever they call them, interdimensional beings, are like, okay, you want the power? You can have it, and you can have everything that goes along with it. And I think that's clever, considering that Palpatine's big thing through most of the third act of The Rise of Skywalker is, I want the power to be reborn.
Yeah.
And once I sit on my throne, which is we established, that's how he's able to knock tens of thousands of ships out of the sky. I think that's clever. I think that would have been a clever way to end the film, is that let his power consume him. Let that be the thing that destroys him. It's like, yes, the good guys are. I mean, you can always have something in there where Ben Solo and Rey can be like, we have to do something to kind of, I don't want to say overload him, but something that kind of like, maybe if he keeps using this lightning, again, folks, I'm thinking out loud here, but like overheats him in a way. Like if he keeps using this power without any sort of, taking his hand off the throttle of it, it will eventually destroy him. Like he only can use it in short bursts, but if he keeps it so sustained, he loses complete control over it, and it will consume and destroy him. I like that as an idea. And you can even throw a line of dialogue in there, like that Rey read that in one of her Jedi books from the beginning of the film. That like, oh, I read this passage that blah 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 blah. That if you keep this power or you use it for such a period longer than maybe a few seconds, it will destroy you. No mortal is meant to have this sort of ability. But
yeah, to get something where characters are able to, take down the big bad guy by playing on his hubris to some extent, and knowledge of, his own limitations. Because I've always kind of thought about it, not always, but in Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, that, Palpatine's been in the background plotting and being shady for so long, and then it's kind of like when he realizes that he can be reborn at the end, he just goes for it. It's kind of that, overzealousness because he's been so patient for so long.
One question about the reborn thing, and I know this is kind of moving away from the Duel of Fate script. Why is it that Palpatine has the ability to go from being like Monster Mash up to like 11, like being attached to what would you call it from the video game Assassin's Creed?
Assassin's Creed thing. Yeah, I was trying to think of that before this recording, but I forgot what it's called. But yeah, he's hooked up to that arm thing.
Yes. Why is it that he's able to heal himself, and his version of healing himself is essentially Monster Mash?
Yeah, that is weird. Maybe that's his personal ideal form.
Monster Mash and the Graveyard Smash, like that's just kind of.
Yeah. That's how he pictures himself when he looks in the mirror. That's what he wants. That's what's that meme? It's like, this is ideal. This is what the ideal body looks like. You might not like it, but deal with it.
But this is a theory I've had now for a couple of weeks now, and I'm glad I can finally bring it up without just kind of like lobbing it out there. Is that I'm not sure. I know we talked about it a lot, but maybe not Rob and I. The Matt Smith, the mystery thing of who Matt Smith might be playing in this. What if they cast Matt Smith to play Palpatine Reborn as a young man? And maybe they tested it. Maybe I'm not saying. I don't think there's nobody's talked about if Matt Smith ever shot anything for this film. It was always the oxymoron of the official rumor.
Okay.
But what if they cast him as a reborn Palpatine, and for whatever reason, either it didn't work, or maybe they figured that it was confusing to the audience, or just it didn't hammer home that nostalgia?
That's what I was going to say, because, it's like when we think about the Emperor, we think about, wrinkly skinned, old dude, that type of thing. And maybe the switch of going to someone younger and someone whose face, audiences are going to recognize might not have worked. They thought it might not have worked, might not have clicked.
That's what I'm thinking, because as I keep watching The Rise of Skywalker, or more thinking about it, I'm like, where would have Matt Smith fit into this? And the only play, unless maybe they had him playing Ochi, the Jedi Hunter, which is always possible. Sure. They could have had him doing the voice for a character, and just they whittled Ochi's role down to just a flashback with like really no dialogue. So why are you going to do that? But still, he would I don't know. Who knows? Again, Lucasfilm's always doing things in Disney along with them.
Yep.
But it would make sense though. Like Matt Smith does have such a defined, what's the word, physical attributes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would imagine he can do a great job at playing a villain, especially being kind of let off the leash, like on a Palpatine level.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always my idea. Because I could very easily imagine Matt Smith with a certain amount of makeup in wardrobe, them telling me that, okay, this is Palpatine reborn. I'm like, okay, I'm on board with it. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, just tell me. Like, if you are going to do you show Palpatine suck the living daylights out of Rey and Ben Solo.
Yeah.
And we see him, like, his fingers heal, his face heals. Why can't he be Matt Smith?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like you said, Matt Smith could I got nothing against Matt Smith. I'm sure he could do a great job as a villain. And now I'm bummed that we don't have that, because if, the movie Star Wars Episode 9 came out and said, oh, this is Matt Smith, this is Palpatine reborn, I'd be like, no, this is Skynet reborn. What are you talking about, movie?
Oh, man, folks. Good old Terminator Genesis references. The living embodiment of Skynet. Oh, my God. I can't believe they did that. I cannot believe that's a thing that exists. Yeah.
The living embodiment of Skynet to the living embodiment of Palpatine.
Yeah, there we go. I like that. I can get behind that. But no, going to some more of the Duel of the Fates stuff, because I only have a couple of things. Like, we didn't really talk about the beginning, the Kuwait shipyards.
Mm-hmm.
When we were talking about that from the Robert Meyer Burnett summary, that I think at the time I said that sounded really clunky.
Sure.
And as I read this, it still feels clunky. It's very reminiscent of the Return of the Jedi thing and of the Revenge of the Sith thing, of the idea like, okay, we stumble in somewhere, now we have to escape because of a plan.
Yeah.
But this felt different enough with the idea of like, okay, we steal the giant aircraft carrier of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
And
I was interested by that idea, and I think I said that when we discussed the summary as well. But I think I agreed with you with the summary, and I still kind of agree with you here. It kind of, everything falls into place in a clunky way, like Rey showing up and using her lightsaber and wanting to stay to fight with the other refugees or whatever, but they can't, and those types of things. And it's like, okay, I get where we're going. Maybe you can smooth it up a little more.
Sure, because I know even in that, I think we talked about the fact that a Tusken Raider shows up out of nowhere. Yeah, and I'm like, there's no way that that would be someone would spot that and be like, nope. But then it's explained in the script that it's a village where they're just capturing people and putting them in a POW camp. Yeah,
because the whole, even the crawl gets at that idea that of Duel of the Fates, that the First Order is basically everywhere and they're running the show no matter where they go.
Yeah, and that sort of stuff. It's like when they announce that Rey's been hiding this entire time, and I can get behind that, and I think that'd be really cool to a visual seeing a Tusken Raider with a lightsaber mowing down stormtroopers.
Oh, yep, sure, absolutely.
That's a really neat visual, to start your movie out with a bang. And then the entire fall, and that's another clever part of this that we've never seen before. Is they steal the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer,
mm-hmm. and
it becomes a thing of Poe. Poe's look what I did! I stole this thing, and look at all the neat stuff it has inside of it. And it's Poe. Obviously, they can track this.
Yeah.
It's only a matter of time. Where are we going to hide this giant thing?
I like that Leia's okay, well, I'm glad the mission was somewhat of a success, not even really, but now we have to leave our base because of this.
Yeah, and I think even though it regresses Poe's character, because clearly he hasn't learned anything since The Last Jedi. Mm-hmm. The idea of just because a plan is ambitious and successful doesn't mean it's practical.
Yeah.
And even though we negate that, in The Rise of Skywalker, it's weird. Poe doesn't regress as a character, but it doesn't feel like he's grown that much.
Yeah, I agree. We just get some backstory, right? That's it.
Yeah, we get he had a portion of his life where he was somewhat unsavory, which is fine. I don't have any problems with that. But yeah, the Star Destroyer thing was neat. I like the idea that they have this powerful weapon. They kind of don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And even toward the end, where Leia's in charge of it, and you have all these Star Destroyers, and they're all and they have to sit there do all these interesting maneuvers with it. They have to much like battleships back during World War II, you had to angle all the you had to put these ships into position. You couldn't just simply. They got to play around with the 3-dimensional space of the vacuum of space, as opposed to it being that very like in Revenge of the Sith, where we have the two ships go right past each other and they lobby shots at each other.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the sort of stuff where, like, I get it. You can't make that sort of thing. That's where audiences tune out, like where these ships start moving in ways that are hard to process. I know in Clone Wars, like Ahsoka once suggests, like, oh, why don't we like maneuver the ship so like when the bad guys come out to attack us, we have the underside be the thing, so we can hide our starships can come out of the top. And it's a really great visual, and it's something that we've never seen in Star Wars, like done, in Star Wars proper done before.
Sure.
And it's one of those things as a fan, you kind of have to like reorient your mind and realize, oh, wait, they can actually do these things. They're not on a 2D plane, like in an ocean.
Yeah, I was interested to read that as well. And I think we've maybe not on recording ever, but that's always been one of my biggest issues with Star Trek is that, space is 3D, but the ships are always like looking right at each other.
Yeah, and I get that, like in the TV shows, because you're restricted in budget, and especially like in the 60s and even like the 80s with Next Gen, you're gonna have a really hard time conveying that and then not making it expensive, trying to show that. But like by the time you got to J.J. Abrams' Trek, it's like come on, think outside the box.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, you don't hire J.J. Abrams if you want to think outside the box.
Sure.
One thing I did want to ask you about, you probably saw the concept art of what happened to Coruscant, where Coruscant has a giant city built above it with one specific like tether in the middle.
Yep.
Did that remind you of another movie that we saw within the last year that we covered on Cinemoddities, of having a kind of, not a bad city underneath, but a city that's kind of in some level of ruin, and we have a giant, like, opulent city above it, hovering above it?
Are you thinking of Alita Battle Angel?
I did, Rob.
Rob.
I was.
I thought of that same thing, and I was just waiting for, it's not Danger Ball, whatever game she has to play to get up there, or whatever.
I'm right now, even though I know Zenger made fun of me for being on the hype train for Alita, I'm going to recite everything I remember from that movie right now.
Okay.
There's Alita. There's James Cameron.
Yes.
who both produced the film and starred in it. Edward Norton plays James Cameron.
Yeah.
James Cameron's the villain of Alita Battle Angel. Oh, Jackie Earle Haley in a robot suit.
Oh, yep. Calls Alita Little Flea every 5 seconds. Yep.
Jeff Fahey.
Yep, the lawnmower man himself with robot dogs, right?
Yes, he has a robot dog.
He's a cowboy for some reason.
Well, okay. What's the last? There was the how many rollerball? Is that?
Yeah, remember that? It wasn't called rollerball because that's.
Are you sure it wasn't?
Well, no, I'm not. But that's
sure
what it was. It was where they were on like the rocket powered roller skates, and they had to get the ball into the hoop or whatever. And yeah, it was like something like with ball or death something. I don't know.
Death rollerball. Got it.
Yeah.
Oh God, what was the city name? The city. I want to say the city's name was Zalem. Is that right?
Yeah,
Zalem.
The last of the floating sky cities. It was Zalem. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, and the last thing I remember. Oh God, what's her name? Oh my God, she died in a bunch of movies in 2009.
Oh, you thinking of Jennifer Connelly?
No, she.
The one who she gets.
Don't give it away. Don't give it away. Don't give that away. It's one of the weirdest things in the mainstream movie. Don't give that away.
True. That's why I was excited to talk about it.
No, not Jennifer Connelly, but that's funny as hell. Oh my God, she was in Avatar. She's in Fast and the Furious again. Michelle.
Michelle Rodriguez.
Yes.
Okay.
She's in there for no reason. Yes.
It's Motorball.
Oh, is it?
Alita. That's what it's called. Motorball. Yep.
Are you sure it's not rollerball? Are you sure? That sounds like that's more correct than motorball.
I don't know. I'm on Wikipedia, so let me check the history and see if anybody jokingly changed it to motorball and not rollerball.
Rollerball sounds more like something Jimmy C would write. Be like, call it rollerball. They're on roller skates and there's a ball involved. That's all that matters. But yeah, no, definitely, obviously Alita being a manga well before a movie. Yeah. So I could see the Madman pulling from that, or Derek Connolly.
Yep. And I think Alita was a strange movie. There's other scenes I'm thinking of that are weird in mainstream media, like the one that I was gonna say with Jennifer Connelly, but also there's a dog character that has a run-in with Jackie Earle Haley, and it leads to the poster of Alita Battle Angel.
Yeah,
remember that?
Oh, that was weird. It's like you think about that, it's like, ooh. After you see the movie, you can't look at that poster without feeling a little weird.
Yeah, definitely.
I will not stand by in the presence of evil.
Oh, geez. Good old.
I gotta watch Alita. I gotta watch that. I haven't watched that in a while. I kind of like, after watching that so much, like in the span of a month, I was like, okay, I'm done with this for the time being.
Let it
I kind of overloaded on that. But no, the Coruscant. I think the Coruscant thing is neat. The idea of having the city being built upon the, I don't want to say ruins, but kind of like the yesteryear of Coruscant. Some of the stuff, like when Rose and Finn go back to reset the beacon or to turn the beacon on, I think that could have been a really neat sequence based on like the beacon turns on and we see all the different planets get the message, and we see, I think you even referenced it, like you see all these aliens. I love the part with Bosk where Bosk sees it and kind of gets annoyed.
Yeah, the script says that he's annoyed. It says something like he's sitting in his den of riches, and he gets annoyed that like his service droid starts playing this message, and then the last thing we get from that little cutaway is that he like looks out into the distance and clenches his fist. And I'm like, I don't know what that's supposed to, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Who knows?
I like the idea. It's like the equivalent of like Bosk is like sitting home watching TV, and you get like one of those like the early warning broadcast system alerts, and it's like, goddamn Rebels is trying to watch my programs. I put up with this once 30 years incident. Ago. Goddamn Skywalker's ruining the internet, or the Star Wars version of the internet. But yeah, I found that amusing. Like you said, Bosk gets mad at the end.
Yeah.
It's like he's a mercenary. He shouldn't care. He should be like, how much are they paying me? I'll do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of the rebellion that Finn leads on Coruscant, I think it's interesting that they show a bunch of AT-STs with like red markings on them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember, they look almost identical to what we got in the Mandalorian with that one episode with the AT-ST. Very similar, right. Red, like battle paint.
Yeah, I forgot about that, or I didn't make that connection. But no, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that stuff is neat. There's a part where R2-D2 practically dies or gets blowed up.
Yep. Oh. Yeah, he gets shot and he like falls over, and they have their C-3PO and him have their emotional moment. And then it's like, like I explained, I think when we talked about Rise of Skywalker, I had an issue with the fact that C-3PO just, boom, gets his memory back. It's like, okay, that wasn't an issue. And it's kind of, they did the same thing in this script because, R2-D2, like, almost dies. There's like a death scare or, him losing power or whatever. And then, like, they go back to Leia, and Leia puts his memory bank back in. He just pops to life. And it's like, so it's like, what's the point of that,
But I forgot about this. There's the part where they pop his memory in, and we get all these
flashbacks.
We get like a highlights reel of everything in Star Wars, and that bothers me for two reasons. The first being like, oh good Lord, that is such heavy-handed nostalgia. Yeah. We do not need a montage in a goddamn Star Wars movie of things we've already seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Especially that drawn out. And the second part is, if you look at all the moments it highlights, it's all just original trilogy stuff.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that for sure. And the thing that I was actually surprised by, like when I was reading this at the end of this whole script, and I see that it's like, the way they even write it, they draw it out with the ellipses, and it's like he comes back to life and he projects all the contents of the memory bank, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, they're going to be stupid about this, and it's going to show things that R2-D2 wasn't even there for. But they don't. They actually only show things where R2-D2 was like in the presence of. And I was like, okay, they didn't go total overboard. But I'm with you. It's so unnecessary.
Yeah, it's just like, that is the most egregious fan service. Literally showing other movie moments for no other reason to just, here you go. Remember this?
Yeah, exactly. And even it says after it goes through what they're going to show, it says Leia is taken aback by the flood of memories. It is a catharsis for her and for us. And that's just so weird to read, where it's like, and now you feel this way.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. Is like, and I know this happens in scripts because you want to identify it, but they say that like instructing the audience how to feel so blatantly.
Yeah.
Like again, it should be obvious how you're supposed to feel if you've written a good script. Like, okay, the audience is feeling that at this moment because it's just blatantly in God, it's in between the lines.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, I don't want that. You can keep that part of this.
I was surprised. I know when we talked about Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, I was intrigued by that idea of, how much of this movie was changed or, damaged because of Carrie Fisher passing away. And I was surprised that she didn't have more to do in this one than I was really expecting. Because, I did like that she sends the message out to the whole galaxy, and it's kind of like not really an arc, but a callback to, Obi-Wan Kenobi, can you help us? You're my only hope from the first movie. But it was still kind of, she was just in the background, it seemed. I thought that he was going to have a lot more to kind of go with rather than just the reaching out to Kylo Ren in, a moment of great emotion.
Yeah, like you said with this, I thought about that too while reading all this. I think if you think about Leia's role in the entire sequel trilogy, she doesn't show up until the third act of The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
She's essentially taken out of play for the entire second act of The Last Jedi, and she has a very minimal role in the third act of that film.
Yeah.
And in this, I think her big moment to shine was going to be the callback to the "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." I think that because even like in the concept art, there's one image and it's her kneeling in front of BB-8, just like she did in front of R2 in A New Hope.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think that moment of her calling the galaxy to help her would have been that would have been Leia's big moment. Much like Han Solo has his Chewie, we're home moment and all that, and being the where he touches Kylo Ren's face, Luke at the end of The Last Jedi. I think Carrie Fisher's big moment would have been that message and her piloting the giant ship, giving Leia after all these years the big starship weapon was going to be the crescendo of her time.
Yeah, and they really do try and punch it up in the script when she shows up in like the captain's chair, the head chair, that whole thing, and it even says something in the script like. She sits and leads the rebellion just like Admiral Akbar once did, type of thing. And I was like, oh, they were going to try and punch that up big time. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But it's weird that like at the end of The Last Jedi, they send the message and the galaxy ignores them for help. Mm-hmm. And then, however, I don't know how many years later this script takes place in the context of Star Wars. But once again, Leia asks for help and everyone changes their mind again.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Like that's the weird thing that both this and The Rise of Skywalker really don't flesh out. That like, okay, Leia asks for help and everybody says no. And then Lando asks and everyone says, sure, we got nothing going on. We got about half an hour. Okay, let's go blow up some Star Destroyers. And then even in this, it's like she asked, did she say pretty please this time where she didn't the first? I do think you need, especially after that ending of The Last Jedi, you need a super big catalyst. And something that's not going to be another planet-destroying weapon to kind of goose the galaxy.
Yeah.
You have to think of something different. Like the First Order, I think maybe the idea of cutting off information.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe punch up in the visuals, or at least that opening scene of this Duel of Fate script, like punch up the fact that like the First Order is really in total control, where it might have just been, not if they were in control, they were the bad guys in the earlier movies, but never to this extent.
Yeah, and I can't help but wonder, because we all know the role China plays into all this stuff, the idea of cutting off access of communication to people and considering how much China likes censorship, I wonder if that was a studio note. You can't have that. You can't have information getting cut off. You can't have an authoritative regime cutting off, or if you do, you can't have it as blatant, and you can't portray it as blatantly evil.
Yeah, that's a good thought for sure. That hopefully that hearing some of that stuff, if we ever get like you've been saying, like a tell-all tale about what happened behind the scenes at Episode 9, that would be a really interesting perspective to get from some people.
Yeah, because even some of the stuff like the Force Ghost, I know this has been a real big thing in Star Wars ever since Disney bought it, is that like with China has a very big thing about specters and ghosts being in media, and everyone's like, oh, that's not true because look what The Last Jedi did with ghosts, look what the Rise of Skywalker did with Force Ghost. And if you look at The Last Jedi, and I don't know if we have anybody that speaks Chinese or understands the Chinese censorship on this, like if you look at Yoda in The Last Jedi, and yes, he's a Force ghost, but he's able to materialize himself physically. Mm-hmm. He's sitting on a log.
Yep.
And I would imagine the textbook definition of a ghost is something that would not be able to do that. So I wonder if there's some sort of, and obviously with Disney, they can hire whoever they want. They can analyze laws. They can figure out the loopholes in all this. And the same thing goes for The Rise of Skywalker. Like, yes, Luke Skywalker is a Force ghost, but he's able to catch the lightsaber.
Yep, exactly. He can manifest himself to some physical sense. And, you know, that you're absolutely right. There probably is, you know, like you said, the loophole, or there's certain things that a ghost, by definition, you know, to say China or to any other country, would have to follow to actually be considered one of those.
Sure. I would imagine, like anything else in life, the Chinese bureaucrats at the censorship bureau, whatever you want to call it, I would imagine they look at things too, like ways to get around it.
Sure.
Especially if it's Disney that's knocking at the door.
Yeah.
Considering that all these movies do make a lot of money and they get a nice cut of it. But getting to the thing of like lightsabers and stuff, I know this is one of the biggest pieces of concept art that people were sharing a lot of when this story broke, is Luke catching Kylo Ren's lightsaber's blade and holding it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fantastic visual. And again, that's one of those things that, like, that's when I talk about how I want something that's new in Star Wars. I want things I've never seen before.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I want.
Right on. Yeah, definitely is unique. Yep.
And I think instead of like, and I get it, the moment of Luke Skywalker catching the lightsaber as Rey chucks it into the flaming debris, I get it. It's meant to be, and I like that scene. I like it in the sense of like it shows how far Luke has come since last time he interacted with Rey.
Yeah,
I like that. But I love the visual of a Force ghost being able to physically grab onto something that's made of pure energy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It is pretty cool.
But speaking of Force ghost Luke in this, there's one point where he shows up and the script goes into extreme detail about the fact that he's now a physical being again.
Yeah, I thought that was strange for sure. I didn't expect it, you know, because like we said, we've seen it, you know, with Force ghosts, you know, materializing, impacting or touching the real world. But this, yeah, it was definitely kind of, you know, highlighted to a great extent.
Yeah, because even prior to that moment, we had gotten moments of Force ghost Luke Skywalker in the film or in the script, and it's never described what sort of, what you want to call it, transparency he has at those moments. And then about 2/3 through, we have this scene and it goes into such excruciating detail. And it's not just like, oh, now he's like real life. It's like, oh, he keeps getting more and more or less and less transparent. And to one point, I think he even says like he's indistinguishable from whoever he's sharing the scene with.
Yeah. And I thought that as I was reading through that, I thought that was going to come up again. And it didn't really. It was just kind of, you know, just describing that moment.
Yeah. And even like at the end where we have Luke, Yoda and Obi-Wan talk to Rey on the astral plane, not brought up again there either.
Yeah, they just kind of talk more about, we don't get any, you know, writing on how they look or anything like that. They talk more about like, you know, there is no life or death here. Like this is a different plane of existence type of thing. And maybe that's what they were going for, Trevorrow and Connolly, with, you know, Luke has always been so powerful that, you know, he can reach out the best out of all the Force ghosts. But it's just not clear. Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing too is like it's even fascinating in this they still don't include Hayden Christensen.
Yeah, I was waiting for that. I thought there were going to be a lot more Force ghosts at the end, but it's just, you know, Luke, Obi-Wan, and Yoda.
There's this. This is the part like I would love to understand the Lucasfilm thought process or whoever's making the decisions, because is it simple, whether it be the lack of Hayden Christensen, the focus on the original trilogy things, like whether it be the the R2D2 doing the holograms of the highlights reel of the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And even in the Rise of Skywalker, at the very end where we see all the Star Destroyers blowing up, and whether it be Endor, Bespin, even Jakku, why didn't we have one prequel planet in there?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't even begin to fathom a guess like you and the other Knights of Vader can. But you're absolutely right. It seems like when we're thinking of talking about things, maybe, you know, fan service and throwing things in there as callbacks, that would be a perfect place to put one or perfect place to draw from.
Well, yeah, because like I I get not showing like weird planets that were seen for only a couple minutes, but it's like, why not throw Naboo in there?
Yep, that was the one that I was thinking of, with that being such a big kind of highlight of episode 1. Yeah, it's just weird.
Yeah, because even like I was thinking about that. I'm like, if I was gonna like change something about the Rise of Skywalker, when you have all these Star Destroyers blowing up, like why not? In a great way, as a wink to the audience, why don't you show one planet from each of the films that's kind of just there, like, and you show it in chronological order, in the sense of like the first Star Destroyer blowing up we see is on Naboo, the second one is on Geonosis, and we see one of the Geonosians like crawl, do its weird like clicking tongue sound, and then for maybe the episode 3 one, it's one of the many Order 66 planets.
Sure.
And then for obviously the original trilogy is easy enough to plug in, not hard to do, and so on and so forth. And I'm really surprised that like why not just include one scene, one shot of Naboo?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And especially in the Rise of Skywalker, it's so lazy. Like the one scene we get of Jakku, it's literally the exact same shot from The Force Awakens, where we see Rey riding her speeder in between the crashed X-Wing and the downed Star Destroyer. And the only thing they added was they had, like, if you look really close in the forefront, and I think it was John Justice who pointed this out to me, you can see Rey's speeder kind of like crashed.
Okay.
But it's literally it's practically the exact same shot and angle.
Yeah, so they're just kind of reusing it. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's like if you're just going to sit there, like I would imagine there's probably some episode 1 footage that could be repurposed. Just take one shot of Naboo.
Yeah.
If you're going to make it so blatantly obvious you didn't put any effort into this, they just they include an extra, and what? Each of those little sequences in that montage is what, 5, maybe 10 seconds long? You don't even need a Jar Jar going, "We so free."
Yeah, just
like
make it a landscape shot, show off the beauty. Yep.
Yeah, something like that. But it's like I just wonder, like, is it the hatred for the prequels, or is it the putting the original trilogy on a pedestal?
I guess I would think it's putting the original trilogy on the pedestal, because I don't know, because it doesn't seem like, sure, it's omitting it type of thing, but I feel like if there was hatred for the prequels that were gonna bleed into it in some way, it would come off as a little more, I don't know, maybe malicious might be too strong of a word, but it's not just leaving it out. It would actually be directly poking fun at it. Like I think you've told me about the whole, J.J. Abrams with Jar Jar's bones or whatever that joke was. And I imagine it would manifest itself more that way than just, disregarding it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the Hayden Christensen thing at this point is almost like a parody. Like I know a lot of people want him in The Last Jedi.
Yep.
And I get it, because he really didn't have a role in that. He wouldn't have had a role in that film. But like in The Rise of Skywalker, he should have really been with Luke and Leia at the end. He should have been there with them. And it's like, I just, like, again, Hayden Christensen's not doing anything. Give him, like, I don't know, $250,000 for, like, a week's worth of, like, photo. Like, they put them in the 3D scanner.
Yep.
Like, come on. Like, that's, like no one's going to not, like, think about it. Somebody, I don't care how much you hate the prequels. If you were thoroughly enjoying The Rise of Skywalker up until the very end, one 5-second shot of Force Ghost Hayden Christensen's not going to ruin a movie for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I still, it would make sense for him to be there. He's the original Skywalker, from episode 1. He started off like kind of this whole shebang, and it's just, I get that, Rey didn't know him. She was closer to Luke and Leia, but still, it wouldn't have taken anything away, like you said, from the meaning of that moment.
Well, yeah, instead to kind of show the fact that it's not just Luke and Leia, and that's the part that makes me think that's more prequel hatred. It's the idea of, like, it doesn't take any effort. They clearly have the resources to do whatever they want and to call people and get them in whenever. And it's like, why not? Like, you ready? Like I don't know. It's like the problem is that, like, I know some people are probably going to say that, like you were saying, Rey doesn't know Anakin. But at the same time, though, what does Rey know about Tatooine?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah.
like how much, like Luke didn't talk to her that much about that. And I don't think even in Return of the Jedi, Luke isn't very fond of Tatooine.
Yeah, not at all.
And I can't imagine Leia telling Rey stories about her brother's teenage years and life on Tatooine, to the point where Rey would feel compelled. Like, to this day, like, I think the most jarring sequence in any Star Wars film on a contextual level in the Star Wars universe is, why is Rey bringing the lightsabers back to the Lars homestead?
Yeah, that I don't know.
Like I understand it's the idea, and again, and that's where I think the prequel hatred starts to come in that like Star Wars chronologically started there in our world.
Yes.
But narratively it started on Naboo.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where, and not saying that Rey had to go back to Naboo, but I honestly think that if you are going to have that ending, and that's where having the shot of what Finn starts a Jedi Academy.
Oh yeah,
at the end of the Duel of Fates
for the Force sensitive kids, he gets them all kind of on one planet and a refuge for him. Yep.
Sure, and that doesn't bother me because they allude to this that I think even more so in this script than the actual Rise of Skywalker, they do a better job at alluding to Finn being Force sensitive.
Yeah, definitely.
And at the very end, Rey shows up kind of somewhat inexplicably.
Yeah, she's just to let everybody know, like the audience know, that she's still doing her thing. Yep.
Sure. And I like that, like in the sense, like, okay, you're not going to kill Rey off. Like, come on,
yeah.
she's our hero throughout this trilogy. But it's like, again, the Rey going to Tatooine at the end. Like, I just don't get it. Like, there's no reason for her to go there. It would make more sense for her to go back to Ahch-To and put both lightsabers in the wall.
Sure. Yeah. I have no idea either. It seems like just a throwback for the sake of throwback, and when you give it any amount of thought, it makes no sense.
Because even I've heard some theories that, like, when she ignites her new lightsaber, it's like people say, oh, you can see a tinge of green in that, like when it ignites.
Okay. And
obviously when it ignites, it turns yellow. And some people even said, oh, maybe the blue and green mix to make a yellow when it comes to kyber crystals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could have made the Tatooine sequence make narratively more sense. Because there's one big, I don't want to call it big, there's one mystery in Star Wars that the sequel trilogy didn't really, it kind of created it and it never explained it. And I don't want it to be explained. I'm just saying this just for the sake of identifying it. What has happened to Luke Skywalker's green lightsaber? The last time we've ever seen it is that he's about to strike down Ben Solo and that whole thing happens.
Sure.
So wouldn't it make more sense that Rey goes back to Tatooine and we see her not just put away the Luke and Leia lightsabers, but the green one is also there. And by combining all three crystals, she creates her own. And that's a perfect way to explain why the lightsaber is a different color. Maybe because it has two blue crystals and only one green one. It creates for whatever reason. I know colors don't work that way in real life, but that's the reason why you get like a yellowish orange hue of the blade. Mm-hmm. And then explains why she goes back to Tatooine because she wants to put all those Skywalker lightsabers in one place. Yeah,
I hear you. That's a neat idea for sure.
That Luke buried part of his shame is he buried the green lightsaber that he felt was the weapon that he was going to use to commit this atrocity at a place where all this pain and suffering of the Skywalker family has originated, whether it be Shmi Skywalker, whether it be the Larses, Anakin's slavery there.
Yep.
I think it would be like, okay, I'm going to bury this traumatic thing with the rest of the trauma of my family. Mm-hmm. And that's the sort of stuff where, again, you're J.J. Abrams and you're Chris Terrio, and you're being paid millions of dollars to write this film. Yet you couldn't think of this?
Yeah, I still think like that last scene, it seems to me that the lightsabers being buried was almost like the secondary thought, where the first thought was the woman asking Rey her name. And it was like, and then it comes down to where they wrote that and they were kind of like, oh, why is she on Tatooine? Like, why is she getting asked her name? Oh, just have her bury some lightsabers. That works, right? And it wasn't fully fleshed out. They never let that idea breathe in the way that, the fans have done, because they can think about this stuff now that the movie's out. And they were more geared towards, her taking on the Skywalker name and just getting to, stand in front of the twin sons again.
Yeah, it's that whole ending is just it feels rushed. Like it feels like it was tacked on. Like they all have their they all huddle and hug at the end on the the jungle planet. Then it's like, okay, we're going back and we see Sandcrawler and Jawas. Remember those?
Yep.
You know where we are, despite the fact the Mandalorian proved that they're not just on Tatooine. But don't talk about that. Don't mention it. And then, like I said, it's just, I don't know. And I know in the Knights Vader Facebook group, Jerry posted this. He goes, when you leave the cinema and realize J.J. Abrams ended the entire Skywalker saga on Palpatine successfully using love to manipulate, corrupt, hurt, or kill every single Skywalker across 3 generations, ultimately resulting in the total eradication of the Skywalker, Solo, and Amidala bloodlines, whilst Palpatine's heir lives on and claims the Skywalker name and legacy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy when you think about it.
Like, and obviously that was not their intent, because if they were that clever to do that, I would be like, you know what, bravo. If you're that cynical and like, if you hate Star Wars that much, and maybe J.J. Abrams does, like, again, he's always said he was always the biggest Star Wars fan when he was making the Star Trek films. Mm-hmm. And maybe he got to this point where he hates Star Wars. It's like anything Star Wars does. Star Wars kind of like corrupts the fans that get sucked into the machine of it all.
Yeah.
Whether that be George Lucas or any of the others like Gareth Edwards, the Miller and Lord, and so on and so forth. And I just wonder, I hope that the reason why that ending is so awful is because JJ is just so frustrated with the whole experience for the last, 5-6 years of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if that's the case, if he did this out of a place of like, oh God, malevolent retribution, I love it as an ending.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting to have that kind of, surface level, we have a happy ending, but that little deeper, subconscious idea is that this is not a happy ending.
Yeah. And I think that's the part of again, if they just kind of stumbled their way into an awful ending, it's like anybody can do that. Anybody can stumble their way into doing something bad. But if they deliberately did that, and they were able to sneak that sort of thing under like the executives' noses, because the executives see it and they're like, it's got Tatooine, check. It's got Force Ghost, check. It's got all these things. And it's like, okay, sold. And then it's like, haha, jokes on them like 20 years from now, and people actually realize how horrible this is on like an in-universe level. It's goofy. It's delightfully goofy.
Yeah, that's a good way to sum up how I think about Star Wars these days. It's a goofy concept that people think about quite a bit.
Yeah, it's Star Wars always is. That's why it's kind of one of those things where you take Star Wars seriously only is in how much the people making it are taking it seriously.
Yeah.
I think there's a Robot Chicken sketch somewhere where it's Vader being like, Luke, I am your father. No, that's not true. It's impossible. And the Empire will be overthrown by Ewoks. That's not true. That's highly improbable. And then eventually, like, Vader sitting there, like, reading off like little like cue cards, and the Force is really just a bunch of microscopic organisms in your blood. And Luke's like, well, if you're just gonna start with stuff like this now, I'm out. And he's like, he walks off the little like railing. And that's kind of like, you have to wonder, it's like, if you get so frustrated with Star Wars, you deliberately start, I don't want to say ruining it, but you start putting a layer of contempt into it, which is what Lucas was doing. Like, we know that. Like, there's the infamous picture from the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull set where it's Harrison Ford, Kathleen Kennedy, and George Lucas, and he's wearing the Han Shot First t-shirt.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
like, and that's a photo that exists. It's not a promotional image. It's a candid shot on set. And is there any other way to interpret that other than a middle finger to the fans?
Yeah. Oh, man, that's crazy.
I
hear you. It's insane.
Yeah, and maybe in a way we have to give J.J. Abrams more credit than we ever thought. That maybe he is this person that realizes much like Anakin Skywalker in Revenge of the Sith. He's on Mustafar, realizing everything he's done. He has a single tear run down his cheek.
What have I become? Yep.
Exactly. I've slaughtered I've accomplished everything I want. The Jedi are gone. The Separatists are gone. But look what I've become in the process.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, but it would be great to know more about J.J. Abrams for sure in that respect.
He's like, I really hope, because considering that he bases all of his life decisions off Spielberg, I really hope that like in the next like 10 years Spielberg like writes a tell-all. Just so JJ has the precedent to go along and do it like 40 to 50 years. Well, what, JJ's what, in his 40s?
I would assume so. Yeah, early
Okay,
40s.
Let's be kind and say 40 to 50 years. Let's give him a very long life. Yeah, I really hope we get that tell-all where it's like by 2017, I hated Star Wars. I wanted it to end, but nobody would let it stop.
Yeah, that would be something else.
Yeah, I want that. Oh, I want that so bad. Like I said, folks. Remember, folks, if you don't like something, try to find the silver lining of the humor in it. It makes life go down much, much smoother. I guess one just final thing that I want to discuss about this script that I thought was interesting was the whole idea of the when Kylo Ren goes to Vader's castle and he finds the Sith holocron that's meant for Vader, and I like how the message gets halfway through. What's the word? Saying its message, and it literally is like, "You're not the right person," and it blows up in his face.
It's just enough time for Kylo Ren to get the important information.
And then it literally it says his face starts to melt and it gets horrible scarring.
Yeah, and it his veins turn purple and they're bursting or something because it's this thing is exploding and burning his face and shooting lightning at it or something. It's intense, and I guess the idea is if you're going to have something that has going to have a security check halfway after the information's been given out, you'd hopefully kill whoever got that information.
Yeah, I guess. But not really good on response time. Maybe I don't know, if in the first couple words turn yourself off. What if there's somebody? What if he had some sort of audio chip or something that could listen, record all this?
Yeah, exactly.
Why would you even turn on? If it has the ability to realize who what your bloodline is, why even turn on? Just blow up.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't get that at all.
Or just make it easier. Don't say anything. It's oh, you're not a Skywalker. You're not getting my secrets, buddy.
Yeah, device locked, It doesn't even have to self-destruct. It can just be a paperweight.
I like the idea that in the Star Wars universe, super secret holocrons have less security features than our cell phones do.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Imagine you get somebody's phone has a password. It takes 5 minutes for it to realize you're not the owner.
Yeah, that would be insane. You're looking through, you're getting bank information and routing numbers and stuff. And then it goes, and it's hey, this isn't you. It's well, sorry, I already got the number. I'm taking that money.
The consolation prize is that it horribly maims you.
Yeah.
You get the information, but you get maimed in the process. So it figures it balances itself out.
Yeah, it's a trade-off.
Yeah, I thought that was funny, though. And like I said, so you could tell, obviously, like we said, JJ did pull from that because the ability to transfer the Force from one person to another in order to heal them.
Yep.
Clearly, he made that more of a benevolent thing in the Rise of Skywalker, which is what I like. I like the idea of Force healing being a non-malevolent power.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have one more final thing, but not about the actual script, but more just about the Robert Meyer Burnett analysis of this. But is there anything specific that you want to highlight about this script before we conclude this discussion?
I think the only thing that I wanted to bring up that we haven't hit on yet was it came out of nowhere to me in the script, and I don't think it was described very well. But we get that shot where Rose and Finn are on Coruscant, and they split up, or that scene, not that shot, I should say. And Finn runs into the stormtrooper. He has this kind of talk with him, and then Finn falls into a sewer or something like that. And there's this big, I don't know, they describe this creature that's eating sewage, and it almost eats Finn. And I'm like, what's the point of this? There's enough conflict going on during this setup for the final battle. Why do we need this other kind of, all this monsters coming to get me now? He could have just met the kid, Dade, or whatever, that takes him to the refugee. But
think, Rob, in what Star Wars movie is there a bunch of action happening and someone falls into a trash area, and there's a beast in there that wants to make lunch out of them?
Okay, yeah, there you go.
Fan service.
Yep, it's another throwback, something we're used to. Jeez.
Anytime something doesn't make sense in Star Wars, automatically apply the filter of fan service.
We've done it before, yeah.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, it will explain the kind of dilemma or the quandary of why does this exist?
Yeah. It seems so weird, so much was going on. We're cutting back and forth to Rey and Kylo to different groups on Coruscant and even the Leia stuff. And then it's this happens out of nowhere. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I know Finn's going to get out of this. There's no tension.
Yeah, but it's I don't blame them for that either. It's
sure.
You need something to happen, and you need to make it exciting because, like, okay, he's evading the stormtroopers, and you have to, I guess, up the stakes. You can't just have him running around corridors because after a while, like, how many times can the protagonist run away from a stormtrooper?
Yeah,
Exactly. They're incompetent through and through. One thing I think is, again, in all these Colin Trevorrow scripts, and obviously we know there's another one out there that hasn't been released. I would imagine there's even more. Apparently, the Sith troopers were his idea.
Oh, okay.
Having red stormtroopers, and maybe they were the I know in this they talk about the mech troopers.
Yeah, and the brute troopers too. At the end, yep.
Yeah, like so maybe that's what it is. But and the concept art I've looked at, I don't see any red stormtroopers.
Oh, yeah. I was noticing that too. They all look like the ones we're familiar with.
Yeah, and the brute troopers, the idea of them being an army of Boba Fett's just like everybody knows my opinion on episode 3 of The Mandalorian. As soon as I saw, I'm like, oh god, it's an army of Boba Fett's.
Yep,
no.
That's exactly as they describe them. Oh yeah.
Oh no! I'm like, please. Oh god, I wake up much like how Rob wakes up in the middle of the night in cold sweats of the "I'm the spy" line. I think of the ending of the episode 3 of The Mandalorian. It's like, no army of Boba Fett's, no army of Boba Fett's, non-flashback.
Yep.
Yeah, that's. Oh god, I get it. Boba Fett's cool. The design is awesome. But you got to cut it out. It's called overexpect. Boba Fett works because he's like I know in EU and Legends they use that armor a lot. There's a bunch of not Boba Fett's in Legends, but like you're making it too ubiquitous now. Like you got to tone it down.
Especially with the Mandalorian, that's gonna be stuck in people's heads. Not that Boba Fett and his design hasn't, but it's gonna be even further now. It's almost we're getting so inundated with it.
Is there? Okay, you tell me because you're the filthy casual. Is there a possibility that at this point in time in pop culture that more people would be able, like more common people, filthy casuals, would be able to point out the Mandalorian, identify the Mandalorian over Boba Fett?
That's a good question. I'm not sure because I feel like Boba Fett has had so much time to, gestate in everybody's minds, whereas the Mandalorian is recently new, relatively new, and I think it might even be the other way. Like I would imagine there's people out there that don't subscribe to Disney Plus, aren't big Star Wars fans, so they didn't watch The Mandalorian, and when they see that show or they talk about that show, they call that Boba Fett, even though it's not Boba Fett. But I'm not sure. That's an interesting idea.
I forget I don't know where I found it online. But it was somewhere where like there was like a Boba Fett in I'm not sure if it was like Disney World or Disneyland or it was like a 501st thing. But there was somebody dressed as Boba Fett and it was like some little kid, like maybe 6 years old, being like, went up to him, like, where's Baby Yoda?
Interesting.
And I'm not, again, for the record, I'm not saying this is good or bad. Just pointing out observation. Anybody can do whatever you want. Not that they're overwriting Boba Fett, because Boba Fett was always a blank slate. He was badass, man. He was the man with no name. You could always, and that was the brilliance of Boba Fett. He was just a helmet.
Yeah, exactly.
And he looked like the most badass thing to ever exist in Star Wars.
Yep.
And now, because of The Mandalorian, we have dozens upon dozens of the most badass people ever. And like anybody who understands the law of diminishing returns, you're going to devalue him in the process.
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
But hey, yay!
I think that's just the modern era of media. They need to run everything into the ground, milk it dry, and it's a bummer.
Yeah,
that goes back to what we were saying about like Darth Vader. Like, glad they haven't done that with him and made him do the flips and things like that.
How long until they create another Star Wars character that wears that costume?
I would imagine that's probably already in the works.
I remember in 2013 reading rumors, and of course they're always rumors, that Disney wanted to bring back Vader, and the rationale would have been, well, it's a suit. Anybody can wear a suit.
Yep. It's a shell. It's armor. It's just everybody can realize it and recognize it.
And that's what I'm afraid of. There's gonna come a point. I keep saying this, like something with Star Wars is gonna there's gonna be another part where it falters, and they're gonna start getting really desperate, and they're gonna start doing weird things.
Oh yeah.
And
Season 2 of The Mandalorian, we're gonna have a bunch of Boba Fett's fighting a bunch of Darth Vaders. That's gonna be the season 2 premiere.
No, they do that at the end, Rob, because they see the ratings are slipping. They have to get it back up, so they reshoot the entire ending. Rob, you can't start off with it. You can't blow your wad that early.
I think that's the whole. What is it going to be? Another 8 episodes? That's just every episode is just that battle. It's one continuous battle, all episodes. And then the twist is that an army of baby Yodas shows up halfway through the season.
There you go.
We have way too much of every character. It's going to be like Deep Roy as the Oompa Loompa in Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's just all copies of the same person fighting each other.
No. Oh no! Oh my God! Please no! Oh God! Insert the clip of the person at the Rise of Skywalker thing saying, "I hate Star Wars.
I want my money back."
Oh God! Like I said, I would begin every episode with that clip if I could. Every single episode. That's you know what I do. If I can't get Domhnall Gleeson to say that, I'll just or say the line. I'll have like, if you won't say that, will you say you hate Star Wars? At that point, he just says, "I am the spy," and I'm like, "Wait." He's like, "There's no difference."
Perfect.
But yeah, the final thing I want to say about Robert Meyer Burnett's video and the summary. Those videos of his are 2.5 hours long. I'm sorry, 4.5 hours long combined, and I don't know about you, Rob, but if I was making a 4.5 hour long YouTube video on this, I think I could have done an infinitely better job summarizing this and conveying the major plot beats than what that was.
I think I have to agree. You know, I know that I didn't watch the videos. I just read the summary, who was summarizing, the guy on Reddit that was summarizing Robert Meyer Burnett's stuff. But, I think it shows, even though there's some things that are lost in translation, when you play this game of telephone, it's still just kind of like it. I know we talked about it when we went over that summary, is that it starts off fairly strong and descriptive. And then at the end, it's just like, here's giant overstrokes and just the main ideas. And if we had read this, like you said, there would have been things, to point out at the end in more detail, in the middle, and not just, say things that I think like we illustrated when we discussed that summary just made us confused.
Sure. And I think like if you actually have this in front of you, I don't know how, like, this isn't dense by any means. It's not like you're reading a David Lynch script where there's a lot of like interpretation as to like what's going on. I don't think this is any sort of mental puzzle.
Yeah, it's very straightforward for sure. Yeah,
I don't know. To each his own. Everybody thinks differently. But if I was given, I don't know, I read this and I was given like an hour or two of prep time, I think I could have conveyed this easily within 2 hours.
Sure.
And infinitely to the point where or to a much more, coherent state where like reading Reddit summaries wouldn't be like reading like the ramblings of a psychotic.
Definitely.
But to each his own. Again, I thank Robert Meyer Burnett for doing that because he gave us a whole episode's worth of topics. So I appreciate him for doing that, even though it was also self-serving for him as well.
Sure. Yeah, and it was our first taste. Like we said, we wanted the Trevorrow stories, and now we actually got them.
And I am so glad that I have this. It's not as horrible as I imagined it would be, but I lost. I lost the Star Wars. That is worth it. That's the level. Like that's okay. I guess a tease of things to come, folks. But like that is Book of Henry level. Like that's that level of awful.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, it's glorious. Absolutely glorious.
I love it. I appreciate it immensely.
Remember, folks, if anybody has any sort of like inside like track to Domhnall Gleeson and get him to say that, we will send you a t-shirt. Let's put that out there. If you know Domhnall Gleeson, you can get him to say, "Hi, you're listening to Knights of Vader and I lost the Star Wars."
Yes.
We will send you a t-shirt.
That's so good.
I think it's a fair trade.
So funny. Oh yeah, definitely. Add some incentive to this for sure. Somebody track down Domhnall Gleeson. Things like that.
Is there like a Peter Rabbit 2 coming out? Like he's got to be doing the press rounds for that soon.
Sure, yeah.
Just get him to say it. Just give him a piece of paper and like slip him like a 20 and be like, "Hey, Hey, can you say this, please? Like, not even, we can always work the Knights of, like, I don't need the Knights of Vader thing. That'd be really cool, but I just need him to say, I lost the Star Wars.
I lost the Star Wars? Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, dear. All right, Rob, with that being said, anything else? You're ready to wrap this up?
No, I think that's it. I think it's, we're ready to wrap it up. I'm trying to, I think we hit all the points I wanted to. If you haven't read the script, like Zach said, and he posted it in the Knights of Vader Facebook group, definitely check it out. I think it is an interesting read. And I guess on a closing note is that I'm kind of baffled by the fact that I know more about a version of Episode 9 that doesn't exist than I do the actual movie.
To be fair, I think every Star Wars fan can say that because we don't know anything about Episode 9.
True.
They were so, what's the word, close-guarded with that.
Mm-hmm.
No, not close-guard. They were very close to the vest with that.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yep.
It's late, folks. I'm tired. All right. So concludes this episode of the Knights of Vader, a Star Wars podcast. Check out the Facebook group that's been mentioned a few times in this discussion. Type in Knights of Vader in the Facebook, and you will find us there waiting for you. Find us on Instagram at KOV Podcast. Shoot us an email, kovpodcast@gmail.com. If you like what you hear, please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes or whatever podcasting platform you're currently listening to us on. Thank you to everyone who has provided an iTunes review. It means a lot. Thank you to An Inspiriority Complex for providing our theme song.
You're welcome.
Okay, there we go. Check out the show notes to hear more from them. If you're interested in a Knights of Vader t-shirt, check out the show notes. Remember, folks, the show notes are a wealth of information. For questions, comments, concerns, or snide remarks, contact me, Zach, on Twitter at Cinemoddities. You can also hear me talk about movies on the Cinemoddities podcast with Rob, where we'll be discussing...
I think... the Hudsucker proxy?
Ding, ding, ding,
ding,
ding.
Right on. Good.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm very excited for that. The wacky circumference.
Folks, it's the most Rob title a film could ever be. You will never get a more Rob title than the Hudsucker proxy. Yeah. And spoiler alert, it's not weird Rob crap. It's actually a good movie.
Yeah, we've been looking at some weird ones. Weird, I guess, for us this year on this month of Cinemoddities, and this definitely falls into that category. It's got a crazy name, but it's one of the more tame movies that I've recommended. If that's a good way to put it,
I'd say it's one of the more conventional movies. Like at the end of the day,
conventional. I like that for sure. Yep,
and it's our comfort zone.
Yeah. So check that out. That episode's a good one. If you've never seen the Hudsucker proxy, give it a watch. It's a good one. And it got a lot of fast talking in it.
So if you like Jennifer Jason Leigh and women smoking cigarettes, boy, have I got a movie for you.
Perfect.
All right, Rob, when you're not talking about women smoking cigarettes, where can people find you?
So you can find me lurking around in the Knights of Vader Facebook group. I'll respond and post some things in there. You can definitely find me and Jeremy as members of An Inspiriority Complex. You can find our music on Bandcamp, iTunes, Spotify, all those usual places. And if you like the Knights of Vader theme song, we're glad, but our other stuff isn't really like that. But still, give us a listen.
Worst sales pitch ever. If you like this thing, check out other stuff that's not similar at all to it.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Alrighty, folks. Good night, but not goodbye. And as always, remember Alderaan and down with the Empire.
Yep, they lose the Star Wars.